Welcome back, everybody, to the SPL. We've got our fourth and final set of the day here for you, Aggro. You and I were able to step away, take a deep breath, some lengthy ones. Hopefully everyone else at home was able to grab some dinner, settle in for what's sure to be a good set between the Knights and Radiance.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one, man, because these two teams had one of the best endings I've ever seen in week number 1. So it's logical to think that they're going to beat that now, right? I mean, that's the way this works. You have to one up.
Expectations, right?
You're like let's say you had a really, really good chair read in the past, right?
Okay.
Like as an ad. Now it's your responsibility to beat that every single time. It's really a punishment for doing something well, and I think that that's what we're going to see here today. I hope, at least, or else I'm going to be disappointed.
Oddly specific. I don't know. That one stings me in particular a little bit. Seems like I have to one-up myself.
Dave, not everything's about you, man. Come on, dude.
But hey, you know what? That means I had a great chair read at some point, and I'll take that one any day of the week. Here you go on the standings, though, to move our way out of me in the spotlight into the teams in the spotlight. Pittsburgh Knights at 3-4. Only 2, I guess now 3 wins out of first place, where Radiance will look to bump themselves up to keep pace here with rival. It's been said many, many times here. Some of the closest we've seen here in the SPL. Looking though to PK, 3-4, 5th place technically here in this league. Moving now into kind of the second round of playing these teams over again. Any specific changes you have hoped to see in this team that you want to now see over the next handful of games?
Yeah, I think that Cuvo still needs to try and find his groove and find a way to assimilate to this all-NA roster. It's something that I asked about earlier that we're going to see in just a little bit. I think that that's the big thing for me, is this team all being on one cohesive page. Because just like last year, there's a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation with PK, where sometimes they come in and they look like the defending world champions that are unbeatable and have this great early game, but also can stall you out and have a great base defense and play really well late game. And then other times they just kind of lose, and you don't really have this big moment like, oh, they really messed up that engagement, or this, they threw that fight by missing this, or being here at the wrong time. It just kind of like, they just kind of get choked out of games at times, and I think that finding a way to stop that from happening and find your way to set your feet at one point, draw your line in the sand and say, okay, we're not giving up this, and we're going to be there to contest it. That takes a lot of time for a team to be able to identify when that's happening to them and how they stop it, because it's unique to every single team. And I know they only made one change, but changing your jungler and your MVP from Worlds is a big enough change that I think that it's fair to give PK some time to find themselves.
And luckily enough for them, despite being 3-4, technically like average as far as the standings go, we saw from them, so plenty of ground able to be made up there. I'm excited to see what Neilma is able to do today as well. I think he's got a big role to play up against Aror on Radiance. But you brought up Cubo Fred in the jungle here for the Knights. We were able to check in with him and see how he's getting on with this new squad.
All right, we've got the jungler for the Pittsburgh Knights, Cubo Fred, joining us now. Fred, first of all, happy belated birthday. It was your birthday this week. No better way to celebrate than to get a big win this week, right?
Thank you. Yeah, it would be really nice, a birthday gift from Radiance to take the L and give me and Neil a birthday gift. So we're looking forward to coming out there today.
Yeah, I mean, the strength of 2 birthdays, yours the other day, Neil's the other day, I mean, no way anyone should be able to top that. But Radiance might have the stuff because they've been looking pretty good. What have you seen from them, and since you've played them week 1, that you think that you can take advantage of this time?
So I felt like even from in week 1, the games were super close. We kind of got picked in the second game, and the first game was like a base race with the Titan being 500 HP. So even back then, I felt like we definitely had the opportunity to beat them. And then throughout the split, they had like really high ups, like they went on a winning streak, I believe. And then lately, they've been showing some rough games, like against Renegades, and recently the last game too, I think it was against Sanguine. They were kind of 2-1 and wasn't too clean. So I think they're not playing the cleanest right now, and I think we're in a really good spot too. So,
Fred, having gone through the whole schedule, played against every team, you've probably gotten a lot more comfortable with your teammates. How different is teaming with 4 other NA guys, now that you've kind of gotten accustomed to it and gone through the first few weeks? How different is this team environment from teams in the past?
So I feel like in the past, since I started Smite, I was always teaming with Trickstack, right? And we would always be the core of the team, kind of, and do the calling and all the preparation, and not the preparation necessarily of calling, but we always had like a steady base, and you always could fall back on that. But now it's like you got to know new people, get to know them, like how do they want to play the game, and obviously they're the championship recently too, so they definitely know what they're doing. So it's a bit of takes a bit of time to mesh in and get to know like how they want to play the game. But I'm feeling we're getting there, and I'm enjoying it a lot. So
Well, hopefully you guys can keep that going and find a win today up against Radiance. Good luck, Fred, and again, happy belated birthday.
appreciate it. Have a good one.
Still feeling good, but some stuff to work on with the rest of the Knights. Would look to go even in the standings today, go 4-4 if they're able to win up against Radiance. Now, Aggro, we got to flip it. Week number 1, this is a Knights team that kind of got blown out, maybe an overstatement, because there was kind of a base race, could have gone one way or the other, but Radiance nonetheless take the 2-0 win in week number 1. Radiance, another team that's been, I wouldn't say hard to nail down, but they're a team that shot out of a cannon, had a couple uncharacteristic losses along the way, and a tough opponent today in the Knights.
Yeah, this Radiance team, I think, is one that is really, really interesting to follow the trajectory of, because a lot of us here on the casting team and in the community, we're probably excited about them, but we're not really sure exactly how good they're going to be. Super teams in the past have always been a little bit worse than what we expected, but this team comes out of the gate red hot and just starts stomping everybody. And then it feels like they get figured out a little bit, where Rival to start jamming it down dual lane. Everyone is starting to repeat that strategy. Renegades as well try their hand at it, and they find a lot of success. And then you feel like Radiance is going to be on this 3-game slide where they lose their last 3 in a row because they are not playing well up against Sanguine, and then they squeak out a victory. And I think that win was huge for this team and their mentality moving forward. I feel like that loss would have really set them behind. You know, it feels really bad to lose 3 in a row, especially in a lot of the same ways. I think that win against Sanguine was so critical for them, but they still have to fix a lot of those same problems. Are we able to handle this pressure in duo lane? How are we going to handle pressure across the map in general? I still feel like when Radiance gets to late game, they're really, really good. They just have to get there, and that's going to be the question on if they could do that against PK today.
And so much, I think, of the early conversation around Radiance is you have these star players, how can we make a mesh? I agree with your point in that it's a lot easier to make those personalities and get the team working under winning conditions. If you start to slide there, that's when maybe some of the cracks start to show. Hasn't quite been the case. Turn around the game against Sanguine, as you point out. Again, tough opponent up against the Knights here today. How are they feeling going into this matchup? Well, we'll have to jump down to an interview and find out.
All right, we're joined by BigManTingz, mid laner for Radiance. Big Man, I mean, we're getting started on the second half of the schedule now. You've played everybody so far, and your first matchup against was one of the craziest endings we've ever seen with that base race. The season's gone a little bit up and down for you guys since then. More up than down for sure, but how are you guys feeling right now coming into the set against PK?
We're feeling pretty good. We had the last week and a half, I'd say, to kind of figure out our identity a bit more and figure out how we want to move forward, especially after the past rough 3 sets, Rival, Renegades, and Sanguine. So we've had a bit of time to dig deep and figure out what we want to do moving forward. So we're feeling good.
I mean, you guys came out of the gates so hot, and then, like you said, these last 3 have been a little bit tougher, but you end on a win, at least, against Sanguine, though it was certainly hard fought. How important do you think that win was for your morale to not go on that 3-game slide?
I think it was pretty important deep down. I don't think many of us would like to admit it, maybe, or I would like to admit it, but I think deep down it was kind of important, especially after losing to Renegades in the fashion that we did in the previous set. But it was good to get the win against Sanguine, not only for the standings, but for our morale as well. So I'm glad we did.
Do you guys feel like that you still are the best team in the league right now coming off that win? Because I think you were pretty undisputed towards the beginning of the split and then had those couple tough sets. Do you guys still feel like you should be considered number 1?
I don't really discussing where I prefer we take it one game at a time, really, and we just move on and we just do our best every game that comes towards us. I mean, people can think what they want. I personally just want to take one game at a time and just do our best in that current moment, and if we win, we win. And yeah, just keep trucking towards Worlds. That's the main game.
I think that's a great mindset to have, big man. Good luck today, and hopefully we have as exciting a set as we did the first time around.
Thank you.
It would be hard to replicate the excitement, I think, from week number 1 between these two teams. I like the mindset, though, from BigManTingz. One game at a time. Let's continue to build on what we've started here and keep Radiance moving forward. Agro, I'm interested now. We've talked a little bit about both teams. Looking at it from a high level, though, maybe what role do you think is going to be one of the more interesting ones to watch? I think Neil Aror is going to be a lot of fun. Where do your eyes maybe go in this matchup?
Yeah, Neil Aror is going to be big. I think that both Benji and Scary D have been standout players out of the solo lane for both of these teams, so I'm looking forward to seeing how those two are going to match up. And anytime you've got Paul on the map, however, whoever he's against is going to be in the spotlight, and Paul will be in the spotlight. So I'm looking forward to basically every lane and how well they can handle up against their opposition. That's kind of what you get whenever you've got star-studded teams like these. I can't really pick one because they're all going to be really sick to watch.
And it's a testament to how close everything is right now, where it's hard to kind of identify one matchup that you're excited about because so many of them are so fun. Maybe picks and bans make the difference here and make one lane stand out one way or another. We've seen some mid lane variety here today. Scylla started to make somewhat of a resurgence. Discordia has been a big pick. Raijin continues to be slotted in there as well. I don't imagine that changes. But meta-wise, what have you made of some of the picks we've seen here over the last couple of days?
I mean, the resurgence of Scylla and Poseidon, which we've seen today, it tells me that we're moving back a little bit more towards more secure than burn in the mid lane. And I think a lot of that started because of what Radiance did up against Sanguine with that raw pick in the middle lane for BigManTingz. So I'm curious to see which direction these mid laners are going to go. When I think of Paul, I think of more gods like Merlin and like that Raijin, not so much the Poseidon or the Ra. Those really aren't in his wheelhouse quite as much. So I'm excited to see what he's going to pull out and if he's going to try and do that same sort of thing that other mid laners are starting to go back to, and if Radiance will stick to what they started last week.
Do you think Aror draws some attention here in the pick ban phase, and Knights are going to take Hercules away immediately off the board? One of Aror's certainly great picks over the years, and one that Knights won't want to have to deal with here in game number 1. Merlin, Raijin, Hell, all taken off the board. Talk about some Paul presence as well. Hell, one of his strong picks. Merlin, Raijin, certainly right there with it, but strong picks in the mid lane nonetheless. Early priority there in the mid lane, though, for Radiance aggro. Do you agree with some of that mindset?
This is something that Paul's been dealing with basically his whole competitive career. When I played against him on the sticks way back when, we were banning out a whole bunch of mages back then too, so it shouldn't be anything new for Paul. But now what does he go to? I mean, Hebo is the obvious choice that he could go towards. Do you want to top 3 that? I feel like you kind of have to if that's the direction that you want to go, because Radiance will likely just stick with this strategy and continue to ban out Paul gods should it get down to that point. But Radiance you got to know that they're likely going to pick Hebo next if you're Radiant. So I think that they are coming in with a game plan around that pick. I'm excited to see what he chooses.
Well, Thor has a above 75% win rate right now, which is pretty nuts, and Adapting has played Thor close to 20% of the time here. One of the gods that kind of goes hand in hand, but he won't get a chance to this time. It'll be Cubo Fred instead for the Knights, but still stands to be a fact that Thor is so impactful. I don't think that's anything anyone disputes. But a big role now for Cubo Fred to find some early impact once the Anvil of Dawn comes online.
Interesting. Radiance kind of tips their hand really early here. This is Camazot's jungle for Adapting and not solo for Benji. Unless Aror wants to take that Yorm's support, which he has done in the past when Yorm was first competitively open. He was playing in support a little bit. Feel like we're seeing a lot less of that for a reason these days, that it's pretty much hard locked into that solo lane.
I don't know. I feel like from you there, Aggro?
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Shift your chair slightly to the side,
this?
please.
Is this what we're looking for? Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
There
yes.
you go.
I was just
let me lean back and get my analysis this way for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, and what analysis do you have maybe around the Hebo pick? Obviously, kind of hand in hand with Paul, and I love the choice of single here. What do you make of the Hebo? Obviously, in the back pocket of Paul, certainly a good pick.
Yeah, it's a pick that he's gone to basically his whole career, and so this has got to be something that Radiance was ready for. And I like the Discordia matchup quite a bit for Discordia because it's pretty easy to just strife him and you force his hand. It's got to be beads or ultimate if you get hit by that strife. Even if it's not a multi-man, just that root in the 3v3 is often enough to force a relic or an ultimate usage. So I think that's going to be a matchup that BigMan's pretty happy to see. It's a character that Camazotz can dive, but the slow immunity gives him some trouble. He's got a little bit of mobility with that ultimate. Maybe the Bat Out of Hell can get outranged, but I feel like this is the pick that Radiance wanted Paul to take just based on their picks and bans.
And Mac, in the meantime, was picked and then banned out of the room, so no more Mac there for us.
Hey,
Horace
I'm never
taken away.
banning Mac, okay? No Mac
right,
bans
she
around
banned
here.
herself.
That's not happening, okay?
She
decided that
shine
she
in front of the camera, right? She wants to get out of here. Chernobog, though, aggro, I think, still very low on the pick rate. 6%, undeniable that it's low. 75% win rate, though, in Chernobog. Again, a pick that it's still low. Maybe see him once or twice, maybe a day or a week here in the SPL, but it's a god that has worked when we've seen him picked up.
And Snoopy played it really, really well in the last set, so this is something that that CycloneSpin likes quite a bit. This is a consistent pick for him. Feels like PK is trying to take that away a little bit from Radiance and add some of their own global pressure to the map, because right now they've already got some with that Thor. Now they've got quite a bit, and they can leave Zapman on that island and then just call him over to the team fight whenever it's time.
Oh, low pick rate, high win rate seems to be the name of the game here for the Knights as a Khepri rounds out their composition. Do you like what the Knights bring here into Game 1?
I like it. Lots of CC, good damage as well. Just a matter of if Paul can stay safe on that Hebo and mid.
Well, the Knights lost this one in week number 1, game number 1. We'll go down to Finch to find out.
The beginning of the rematches continue, and as Dolson said, it was Radiance that came out on top. But it was close there, Mifflin. It's going to be Finch and Mifflin here bringing you the call. So I'm sure Radiance would like to find a convincing win, and the Knights would like a little bit of payback. But two well-rounded drafts from these two compositions will what they will take into battle here with them, particularly Radiance with a ton of dive. The Bacchus, the Jormungandr, this Camazotz. It could be tough for the backline of the Knights.
Neilma on this Khepri is going to be able to mitigate a lot of that aggression in the late game. If people like to dive on a Paul, you have to dive him twice with the revive coming online. There's also a bunch of dive potential coming out from the Knight squad as well. If Cuvo finds a big dunk in the back line, Paul could very easily dive with him. Not often that you can say that your mage is going to be diving with your assassin, but Paul on the Hebo, he's one of the most aggressive picks out of the mid lane. Paul pilots him at an incredibly high level. I'm expecting these fights to begin with a dive from Radiance trying to get onto Paul. Paul's going to get revived and then immediately start diving himself. And it's going to be hard to deal with. It's really on whether or not they can blow him up before Neilma can find the revive.
A lot of pressure placed onto this Khepri. We don't traditionally see, I feel like, these really supporty picks that much anymore in the support role all that often. A lot of the times it's more like this Bacchus, right? Something aggressive and you completely can get active from minute 1. But I think Khepri can kind of walk that line sometimes. Abduct can be a great tool for setting up for the rest of your squad. Alongside that route, as Aror is able to find a knock-up and a nice belch there on the backside. Do you like still seeing the supportive style as Tingz barely able to avoid Cubo Fred in the middle lane?
Man, we both take a sharp intake of air there as Tingz makes it out with literally 5 health. I like both duo lanes here. If Aror can get the early game rolling and find some early picks onto Zapman, then he can very easily rotate out a lane, leave CycloneSpin alone. That's a favored 1v1 situation, Xball versus Chernobog. Neil is going to make up a little bit for some of the lack of clear from the zoning. If he can find this second ability on the waves, people like to sleep on it, but Khepri has some of the highest pressure on lane waves and the support role. He's almost like an OG Sylvanas in that he's just going to push it out, back up, and then maybe look for a pluck if they get lane pressure.
There's tons of potential if you could find that CC for maybe some turnaround plays, but who knows if any of that will actually come to fruition. Seems like that little bit of a scare for BigManTingz is about the only scare. We have been seeing a trend of some of these early game rotations over to the long lane right around now. I don't know if that's quite the call here. You can tell from Cubo Fred's pathing that he's heading to those back harpies. Maybe he'll potentially take a look around. Meanwhile, Adapting is at the Oracles, so he's located on this left-hand side of the map as well. But even still, it looks like there's not going to be any of that traditional early aggression, especially with the supports both staying in lane here this time too, Miff. You know there is going to be that additional source of backup. Maybe it's not quite that time to get aggressive as Aurora finds another flop. The follow-up damage is there, but Neomaw's comfy.
Take a peek at the relic selection from both supports as well. Khepri going a more defensive relic, a little bit more standard in the shell. But Aror getting the blink means that he's going to be looking for big plays very early on. Blink into mid, find the belly flop off of that, maybe try and pick out this Hebo on cooldown. The second he hits level 5, I imagine Radiance is going to look to immediately pressure onto Paul. This duo lane, they're not too concerned about it. They don't need to win this lane per se because they have a much juicier target, a much easier target to shut down. Zapman's got plenty of ways to escape. He's going to very easily dash into a wall. Once Khepri hits level 5, he's almost always going to be around. So the aggression from both teams looks like they're going to be focused towards that center of the map. Thor should be able to find pressure anywhere due to that global presence, but Camazotz is going to have a lot more time choosing his targets and deciding which lane he's got to put ahead.
And it's a harder choice for Camazotz, kind of like you said, right? I mean, Thor can kind of make up, even if there's not a lot of pressure or no one's really committed too far out of position, he can make up for that with all the ground that his ultimate covers. But when you're trying to decide where to gank as a Camazotz, I feel like it must be so much harder. You kind of need them to be a bit out of position because your dive is so much more reliant on you closing that gap more manually, unlike the Anvil of Dawn.
Yeah, a lot of gods have to make the trade-off. Do I want to look for ganks in the early game? I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of my farm. When you have a global ultimate, that's not the case. Clear a buff, you're already in range to gank. Just go ahead and press 4. Looks like Cubo's going to try and position towards this duo lane, but Cyclone playing incredibly passively. Going to deter him from wanting to do that. Going forward, both teams are pretty comfortable waiting for the late game. BMT on this Discordia is going to scale very well. Adapting is going to have a much easier time diving once he gets some of his damage online. Neither team feels really pressed to make a play in the early. The only thing I'm really keeping my eye on, and I pointed out already, this Aurora rotation in a mid. That's when we really see that Radiance is going to start making their plays. Forcing out the beads early on a Zapman is nice. That's going to open up to a gank as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Aurora potentially being able to gank over to this middle lane, Mifflin, and I think that's something that is worth considering here a little bit, is just how and where he's going to be spending his time once he joins up with this sort of 3v3 alongside Adapting and BigManTingz and kind of leave CycloneSpin alone on this island. Should be able to relatively trust him over there up against Zap. But you do also have to wonder if he's going to have to feel like he's spent a little bit more attention towards left, because it is so easy for a Cubo Fred gank to come from just about anywhere. I feel like the job of Aurora in this mid lane, or as the support in this game, and where he chooses to go, whether it's the mid lane or the long lane, could be particularly tough, because it feels like the ones with the pressure right now, with that ability to go anywhere on the map, really is the Knights, and they kind of have to respect that. But so far, they've been able to outfarm only slightly in terms of gold.
It's been a slow start in this game, 5.5 minutes in, only about a 700 gold difference in favor of Radiance. They're farming out the neutral objectives very well. The right side mid-camps have been going to Radiance on cooldown, and they've been getting a little bit of a totem a coup advantage. It is actually 2-2, so I stand corrected. But that Soul lane, taking a peek over there, Jormungandr versus Sobek, that's going to be the most wet noodliest lane you've ever seen. The gank potential from both teams is going to be incredibly low, but the rotation potential is going to be incredibly high.
Zapman using the ult just to get back into lane, but not really any aggression happening on the left-hand side. And you're right, but we don't see much of these Guardian solos much anymore, especially after that Guardian's Blessing change and make it a little bit less viable when you're up against a warrior. But in the Guardian mirror, so to speak, both over there in that short lane side, they should both be relatively safe and not have to worry about too much extra aggression. So I suppose if everywhere is feeling relatively comfortable, we can start talking about the mid to late game. And when these rotations might come out a little bit more, I mean, we said that the Knights have this composition that feels like they might want to fight a little bit more around each other, around this ultimate from Cubo Fred, around this ultimate from Neomawd to give the res to those who step out a little bit too far out of line. Is that still the read you have, where it might be the Knights that are a bit more active once we do get to that team fighting stage anyway?
Once these second relics come online, once Paul gets his second relic, he can start to look to play a lot more aggressively. I imagine, even though he goes for Aegis first, we might see him pick up the Blink instead. There's not too much on the side of Radiance that he's going to have to worry about beadsing out, so it's going to allow him to pick up a more aggressive relic. From there, Neomod's only job is to wait for Paul to find the Blink in or aggress on his own, and then get the ult revive. And from there, hopefully, Paul had already found a kill, you start transitioning it towards an objective. For the side of Radiance, what you want to do is have Aror move in, try and shut down some of that aggression for Paul. Make sure that he's not the one engaging on his own time. Find the flop, have BigManTingz poke him out from a range. Neomod doesn't really do much in terms of counter-engage outside of the pluck. If you're using pluck on Aror, the only person in front of you, that's going to be the best case scenario for Radiance. It's whether or not Radiance can rotate in early and put the kibosh on Paul before he gets his aggressive relic online. I'm really looking for pre-12 aggression.
Aror considering some pre-12 aggression, but decides to stay on his side of the wall instead. We are starting to see some small differences come out in the builds in terms of what's being prioritized. Devourer's Gauntlet right away for Zapman, so he's already got that stacking, whereas CycloneSpin went to the boots right away, and I wonder if that's because CycloneSpin thought there might be a bit more pressure, and he would need that movement speed a bit more than Zapman would. Either way, a slight advantage to Zap then, because the early aggression hasn't really been there, and he's already got the stacking going. That's not the only area where there's some differences. Aror and Neil feeling differently about how they need to move around. Aror prioritizing that extra movement speed from the Travelers, as opposed to the CDR there from Neil, who I bet wants as many ultimates as he can get off here in this game. You kind of start to see just how they expected this game to go and how they felt they need to respond to it already showing up in these early build paths.
There's a ton of respect just in the positioning and the movement around the map. It seems like Radiance, even though they're a little bit higher in the standings, are showing the due respect that they owe to PK, especially considering how week 1 went. And this game means a lot to Radiance. If they drop it here, they're going to fall a lot in the standings. PK need to prove themselves as well. They're a little bit starved for wins this season in comparison, so they need to prove themselves in the second half. The pressure is on for sure right now, and in a salty run back like this, both teams want it more than they ever have. But it seems like it's not really impacting their play. They're not getting impatient. They're not trying to force out any fights in the early. They're playing for the late game. Both teams know that they scale very well, so they want to get the best fights they can get going. Once the 5-on-5 start rotating in, once these soul laners start getting the ability to rotate out and start participating in the fights there, that's when we're going to see some aggression.
Zapman has ulted in. He's caught Aror on the purple buff. Your first blood is found independently by Steven Zappis getting aggressive in the long lane and ulting in with that Living Nightmare, and Aror just was not ready for it. That's one of the advantages of picking this Chernobog pick. You get that moment to sort of assess if you can find someone by themselves falling low to a camp, but it works out really well for the Knights. Now grouping up around this Gold Fury, and because this first blood came so late, I think they're right. They can afford to just start this objective up right away, and no one can rotate in to contest. The Knights get first blood and the objective.
Immediately, we saw BMT try to move up, get in range for that Gold Fury, but Paul follows him, force him to back up on the rotation despite having Jormungandr on his back. I love that play from Paul. He knows, if I can stop this rotation, Gold Fury is confirmed. Cyclone can't rotate in alone, so I'm going to take a little bit more aggressive pathing. I'm going to take the risk, not worry about Benji coming up behind me, and it gets them the Gold Fury, first blood, but this tier 1 tower in return might open up the map a ton for Radiance.
That's if they can get it, but Cubo Fred's presence plus the backup coming from the Knights is too much, and Scary D has the long rotation underneath. Good ultimate from the Knights, they find the res. Paul gets the kill into BigManTingz, a little bit of help from Scary D. Cubo Fred takes to the sky, but he's got to be out of range of anyone relevant at this point. Instead, he heads back to grab the back camps, but this is still a nice little surge of life here from the Knights. The left side gank from Zapman, the fight here in mid, and the Fury. They've opened up a nice little lead.
Defending the tower so well as well. Radiance try to get something in return on that early aggression from PK, but doesn't come to anything fruitful. The Khepri ult from Neil, exactly what you love to see. Someone dives in, immediately he drops the ultimate, even at a quarter health, and knows they're going to have to force the damage, or Cubo's just going to kill somebody. They have to peel him off by killing him. That's incredibly smart play from PK. I love the defensive rotations. Despite having an aggressive comp, they're still waiting for Radiance to step up a little bit too far. They wait for maybe, we saw Aror just use his jump once on a purple buff alone. Zapman immediately optimizes on it.
This might be trouble for Zapman now. Catches him right when he comes out of the wall. Will go up to the sky, but where can he land? He heads over towards Adapting, goes rotating in, gets a little bit of backup from the squad, but Radiance still considering some aggression. Cuvo Fred now the one that's in their crosshairs, but they can't quite lock him down, and Radiance, after their aggression there and left, they force some ultimates, but really can't lock anybody down.
Crazy to point out, despite a 2-0 lead, despite First Blood, despite an early gold for you, Radiance's gold difference is less than 1,000.
Well, they had the lead before that in their favor, and they might be able to find something back. Not if they end up losing. CycloneSpin. Cuvo Fred catches him out, trying to get aggressive on the purple buff in vain. It favors the Knights here yet again. Now Aror is on the retreat path. Abduct can't be here for Neil, and Cuvo Fred can't find the wall. But this is everybody, the entire Knights roster on the left-hand side of the map, and Aror can't escape from that. 4 unanswered for PK.
They're playing incredibly clean, and as a squad, the second they can group up as 5, that's when they start making aggressive plays themselves. We saw that even Scary D's rotating towards this duo side of the map. Those 2 clean picks mean that this tier 1 tower could fall very early on, and it seems like Zapman's absolutely fine with that, get the global gold. But if Radiance decide to, they could start zoning him off at this tier 2 tower. If CycloneSpin decides to, he could just freeze the lane right on tower line and make it way easier for counter rotations to come through. If Zapman's wants to farm safely, he's got to move even further up.
CycloneSpin didn't want to let them get their backs off. He's got Adapting here too, and with Neil Ma low on mana, they should be able to make this kill happen. He has so few options in order to escape. Was able to find that route towards the tail end, is at least forcing Radiance to spend a little bit of extra time hunting him down, but that death was assured and certainly going to happen in favor of Radiance. So they get something back in terms of some kind of answer, but the Knights haven't done anything particularly crazy. They've just used these ultimates and their ability to rotate and catch Radiance off guard to take favorable fights.
That's the mobility afforded by having Chernobog, by having Thor, by having this lightning rod for aggression in mid inside of Paul. They can just control the side lanes if they so choose and allow Paul to free farm in mid, not splitting too much farm. I love what we're seeing from PK. Unfortunately, Radiance does pick up a return kill onto Neil, but I'm sure he's not too pressed about it as he's able to back to base, start working on what could be a Rituals dagger. We see that Paul has already elected to pick up beads instead of blink, so he's going to take a more passive stance in these fights, maybe allow for Cuvo Fred to be the one doing the true diving and have Neil focus his ultimates there. So far, no one's really been aggressing onto Paul. He's been able to just free cast and free farm the entire time. Maybe feels like eventually they're going to have to start shifting the aggression, might as well go a more defensive relic.
And you talked about earlier how this lead for the Knights wasn't quite as much as you would have thought based on how well the start of this game kind of went for them with that 4 unanswered until just now with the return pick on Neil. But it's because Radiance actually got off to a decent start just farming-wise, somewhere close to 1,000, maybe more like 800 gold or so in their favor just from farming that map a little bit more efficiently than what we saw from Radiance, or rather from the Knights. And the Knights just now kind of cutting back into that with these kills and with that Fury. So maybe this next Fury can be the difference maker then. It'll be spawning up in just a few seconds. Cuvo Fred and Neil Ma are here, Paul local as well, but the Knights not going to act on it the second that it spawns, but this Fury could be the big decider on the back of another pick.
Ward Vision favors PK and aggressive. They have the Sentry on the Gold Fury, but Radiance has incredibly defensive wards. If PK decide to maybe force a fight on the Gold Fury, they will have to chase out a lot further as Radiance are going to be privy to it very early on. This rotation from both Soul Laners means that they're ready to defend. They know that there's going to be a fight around it. My eyes are going to be on Cuvo. My eyes are going to be on Benji to see where the dives land for either team.
This is good poke, though, from both teams. If you can force one of these solo ultimates out early, then it makes your fight around the Fury that much better. Both of them get away holding on to their ultimates, and both take a little bit more poke than they would have bargained for, but both should be fine to be here for this next fight. The Knights are the ones with positioning around this Fury, and they're starting to burn it already, daring Radiance to force their way in, and no one can do so safely. CycloneSpin's already used the dash, and the Knights grab the Oni Fury. Radiance really, with a soft defense, don't even step in to try and contest.
All PK had to do there was say, Scary, just stand between us and the enemies. They're so scared they won't move up to defend. Scary says, oh, bet, does it himself, has to use the ultimate to escape, but that's a low cost in order to get that free objective. PK controlling the map incredibly well. Now the gold lead looks closer to 1,000 in favor. Now Pyromancer's where they could move on to next. They could return to farming either way. Paul's been having a very slow game, 2-0, but no one's been aggressing onto him. He's able to pick up Divine Ruin very early on. He's got a ton of penetration, no real utility needed inside the build because no one on the side of Radiance has been able to move up in the aggressor position.
Yeah, he is building to end somebody, whoever it is that steps in his way. He's elected to go with largely the flat pen here early, but could have something like a Soul Reaper coming in next for a little bit more in that percent pin category. But not a bad start here for the Knights at all. It has been relatively slow from both teams so far, but you kind of highlighted this earlier on. I don't think either team feels as though they have to start playing early. You know, we're not seeing a ton of early game skewed picks that are going to fall off late. Both teams have a Guardian in the support role, a Guardian in solo, who are going to rotate over and scale plenty fine later on as well. So I don't see any reason why this pace has to change in the next 5 minutes or so. Both these teams have it the way this has gone so far.
The only thing that could really change the pace at this point is if one team starts to establish a larger lead. If we start to see a bleed start to occur. If someone gets a 3,000-4,000 gold lead, if Radiance starts to pull ahead, that's when they're going to start to get pressed and they need to make some changes. But as of right now, no one's really the beneficiary of this aggression, this early passive state, because PK, even though they're getting the objectives, aren't quite pulling ahead.
Well, it is the Knights stepping on the gas here one more time, and they're brute forcing CycloneSpin underneath this tier 2 tower, but here comes the backup for them. They can't save the life, but they can at least punish them on the backside, and they bit off a bit more than they could chew, did the Knights here this time. The rotation from Aror, Tingz, and the rest of the backup there proved to be too much, and the Knights end up losing the 2-for-1.
That's the double-edged blade that is taking an early tier 1 tower in these side lanes. Had that tier 1 still been up, Cyclone wouldn't have to run nearly as far, neither would have Pittsburgh Knights. Cuvo and Zapman get caught out a little bit deep trying to dive that tier 2 tower. It's very easy for Radiance to get the rotation path in there. Adapting and Aurora didn't really even have to go out of their way. They were just farming the jungle. They see that the entirety of PK's duo lane is just pushed up too far. They get a quick 2 return kills. CycloneSpin does fall, and they return the tower as well on the tail end of it. Now the gold lead shifts to 800 in favor of Radiance.
Yeah, and that 1,000 gold lead or so, but whoever is in possession of it, it's really not making that big of a difference between these squads. We're at the 19-minute mark now, and you can consider this dead even between the squads. I mean, a little bit of experience back and forth, a lead for Adapting slightly, a lead for Paul slightly, a more significant lead for Aurora over Neil. But Neil has certainly been able to do everything they've needed from him up until now. We're going to be moving into this mid-game portion where the laning phase is breaking down, virtually tied at this point. So it'll come down to execution. Aurora knocked up in the CC chain already, but how much will they commit? The charge prey further pulls him back, now slowed by the lurking in the waters, and the chip continues. The root is there too, so the lurk in the waters can provide more damage, and Aurora cannot live through it all. The Knights find their 6th kill of the game.
What a gnarly CC chain that Aurora found himself stuck in. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. He gets plucked, he gets pulled by Neilma, he can't jump away because he knows that Sobek lurking in the waters is going to slow him out. Once he finally does decide to, Cubo's already there with the wall. That's going to open up now. PK can take the Pyromancer for free. No one really in position from Radiance to defend it, especially a single man down. It's been a slow start, but PK are slowly taking away the objectives to maintain the farm. Radiance are just playing the map incredibly well. They're splitting the farm very evenly. They're not leeching too much through supports. The jungler's been able to farm up on his own very easily as PK hasn't been invading. Despite it being 6-3, despite 2 gold Furies and a Pyromancer, the gold lead still maintains in favor of Radiance.
It's actually pretty crazy when you consider that they've been able to maintain that parity throughout this game. And it's interesting, we talk about, to kind of go back to that last kill onto Aurora, we talk about how much you commit onto a kill from time to time. And that time, it was literally just a time commitment. It was not a quick kill they got into Aurora, but they really weren't that far positionally committed. The only ultimate they used was Scary D's, and that one is fine to use. It's so hard, I feel like, to punish on the back of that kill when the Knights really didn't have to give up a whole lot to make it happen with Aurora, except being willing to slowly keep him in that CC chain and not let him escape.
That's truly all it was the CC chain. It was done exactly right to extend it as far as they possibly could, put Aurora as far out of position as they needed to. And because of that, they were afforded the opportunity not to use their huge commitments. Paul wasn't forced to use his ultimate. Cuvo didn't have to use his. Nothing had to be forced there, and it leaves them available to just continue pressuring the map. Because there was no commitment on that side of the map, Gold Free is now under duress.
They brought Adapting low already. Aror feels like he has to go in right away with a little bit of backup from Benji. CycloneSpin low too in the back, so Cuvo Fred gets aggressive, but there was plenty of answer. Benji gets the kill in the Paul way in the back line. He might have Neilmaw as well, who's forced to use that res on himself. Looks like he didn't have it to get Paul out of danger, and now that Adapting has rotated in, they can cut off Scary D. The bat out of hell should be able to get the danger without any answer, and Adapting completes the killing spree. That makes it 2 for 0 in Radiance's favor, and suddenly, who cares about this Gold Fury, Mifflin? Maybe we can head right over to Fire.
30 seconds left on Hebo's spawn, 40 on Scary D, 5 members strong on the side of Radiance. No ultimates available, however. This Fire Giant could be done, but Zapman does a good job ulting in there and forcing the aggression onto him, slowing down that rotation path to Fire Giant. Now Radiance has a lot less time to play with. Maybe they decide to split and push this mid tower instead.
It's a good read there, Miff. It certainly works from Zapman if that was the call. Now Radiance will have to settle for the silver medal, and that never feels good. Your boy got bronze, so maybe I can't complain. Gold Fury being burned quickly by Radiance, but the Knights are nearby and contesting. Can't quite do enough, though. Radiance secure the objective off good zoning from Benji and Aror. And Radiance, this little small 1k gold seesaw tips back in their favor a little bit more now.
Gold has been ever equal, but the entire time, Radiance has been building this XP lead across the board. 2 levels up in the jungler, 2 levels up in the soul lane. There's plenty that they're using to pull ahead despite not getting these early objectives, and now that they are, Gold is starting to swing in their favor. The late game is approaching rapidly. Most people are level 20 at this point. They're rapidly approaching it at least. Fire Giants, where everyone's eyes are going to be going forward. Now, whichever team gets the defensive positioning around it, they can get the wards online and look to take their own fights in their own time. If Pittsburgh Knights decide to group up first, they could very easily set up that same CC chain that we saw used on Aror, blow up anyone that decides to face check the Fire Giant. If Radiance does the same, Aror can do to them exactly what happened to him and CC with the belly flop and have huge damage output from Adapting and BMT to blow up just about anyone on the side of PK, barring maybe Scary D. It's really still a completely even game. It's just whether or not someone's going to step up a little bit too far. Any opening for either side is going to be detrimental, as Fire Giant should be really easy to blow up at this point.
Yeah, and look at these levels. The experience deficit you talked about, too, really isn't going to matter much more either. Just about everyone's level 20. Cubo Fred's still 19. Cyclone just ticked over the 20 as well. It's really just the supports that are falling off. So even though Radiance spent like 24 minutes steadily building up an experience lead, I don't know that it's going to end up amounting to a whole lot here for this squad. What about Adapting, though? He has his bees forced out in the jungle, getting too aggressive. Neilmaw locks him down, and CycloneSpin has to use his ultimate so they can make it out as well. A nice little win for PK to strip away a couple cooldowns.
That's huge. Taking away those beads especially is such a big deal if they decide to force the fight on Fire Giant again.
Whoa! Benji gets popped in the middle lane. Neilmaw is the one that gets the credit there for, but he never even gets the ultimate off. I don't think he was expecting there to be that much damage, so now the Knights can start to head over to the Fire Giant side of the fight and see if they're ready to force a fight in their favor. The Radiance has to walk in low information, so Aror steps in early, but they really hadn't committed much at all, so they can just turn their heads and deal with the Bacchus. Cubo Fred takes to the sky as well, sees CycloneSpin, and Tingz in the backline, so comes down to say hello, forces out another set of beads and keeps up the aggression. Good strike from Tingz to slow him down, but only a bit as CycloneSpin gets his wings clipped. They turn back towards Aror and gets a double for Zapman. He's done it before, and he'll do it again. Time to head back towards the FG.
PK is playing as a 5-man death ball. If you ever wondered what it would look like if Sanguine played against Sanguine, this is exactly what it would be. One team just needs one opportunity to pull it ahead. Benji doesn't expect the damage output, gets CC'd immediately. Paul uses his ultimate for the first time maybe this game, finds a kill immediately. Then PK have to move up to face check the Fire Giant. Unfortunate for them, or Radiance have to move up rather. Unfortunately for them, PK's CC chain is equally as potent, eventually blowing up both Aror and CycloneSpin on the chase. It's been rough for either team going forward, but now the first actual difference in the game has been made. PK now have Fire Giant. They could back up, spend the gold they just got from winning a team fight as well as taking those objectives, and start pushing down these towers. And there's plenty of gold still left on the map. They just take a tier 2. There's still 2 more left available and a tier 1 in mid. They've got plenty of time to work with. They don't even need to take a Phoenix with this Fire Giant. They can immediately take these neutral objectives inside the towers, then back up to Gold Fury and prepare again. They have a lot of time to play with.
So the Knights can be in the driver's seat. As you said, they don't necessarily have to go get those Phoenixes. They should still be able to do good work to establish a lead otherwise, but I'm sure that that's the goal here for the boys, is to get as far to that enemy base as they can. I do wonder, though, about the siege here for the Knights. A lot of this rotational ability that's been great for them around the Chernobog ult, around the Thor ult. I wonder if that's quite as strong. Maybe Zapman could potentially use it as a second lifeline to ult back in, or how do you think of the Knights' siege potential here and how that changes compared to these other fights?
If I'm PK, I'm sending Zapman as far away from the actual siege as I can. If you want to push down duo lane, send Zap over to solo, force someone to rotate there. The second someone rotates on the side of Radiance to slow down Zap's push, you can use that Chernobog ultimate to reposition and force a fight on the other side of the map. Radiance is obviously going to be aware of that, so they could send someone who's a little bit less priority. Benji could slow down the Zap push and then very easily use his pseudo-global to catch up if he has to. Right now, it seems like PK is completely content grouping up as 4 and having Cuvo pressure out the long lane. That's, again, a similar situation. You still have that semi-global ultimate. He can rotate in if a fight ever happens.
Though it is worth mentioning, Benji doesn't have the traditional teleport for the solo laner. It's Thorns and Aegis that he's elected to pick up as Zapman over and right. Looks like he ulted over, maybe to try and catch it adapting, or the other way around. The ulted when adapting caught him out. Either way, didn't quite see that. Also on cooldown now. The Knights have done a good job clearing up all of those towers, though. It's just the Phoenix is left for them to try and deal with on the side of Radiance so far. They're now zoning to make sure they get Primal. Aurora's committed the flop at this point, so he could be in some trouble. Does still have the blink, but as long as he's in combat, it's not an option. Finally gets some peel from the squad, so Aurora should be safe, but Cubo Fred lets no man escape. He takes no prisoners as he hunts down Aurora way in the backline. Cannot quite catch up to Tingz, though does put out some decent damage. Maybe the Knights can turn this into a little bit more on the Phoenix Siege after all. Another minute to work with if they want to try it.
And they've got 30 seconds left till Aurora respawns. BMT's beads are down. This could be a very easy power play, but instead they've just gained a ton of gold. They've taken 3 towers, a gold fury. They can clear out their own jungle and create a lead there. With only 45 seconds left on Fire Giant until they have to worry about going to defend the respawn, they can just go ahead and establish a lead, use that gold to build up their builds, maybe sell some boots, get some wards online, and get ready for the secondary Fire Giant. Right now, they know that in a 5-on-5 fight, they should be favored just about every step of the way. Paul's only had to use his ultimate twice this game, and so far, no aggressions come his way outside of 1 death. He's absolutely fine, just continually poking out whoever walks in front of him. And so far, no one's had to dive on the side of PK. Usually, Radiance is either walking in and getting caught out, or maybe Scary D finds an easy pluck, but they haven't had to chase a fight too far into the entirety of Radiance, and that's partially due to the fact that there's not much disengage potential on the side of Radiance. If someone does get caught out, there's really only a flop available, no heavenly agility, Shell's not really online for them. They have to win the fight initially, Radiance that is, if they want to take it.
So far for the Knights, this has been a relatively kind of coasty game, right? I mean, has there even really been a full 5-on-5 team fight yet? I don't think so. And so they haven't even had to worry about how they match up with Radiance in that regard. By the time there is one, they'll come in with, as you just elegantly highlighted, a pretty substantial advantage in terms of all their gold that's in their favor. Before this fight, though, kicks up, we're still 20 seconds or so away from FG kicking off. It's worth doing a quick roundup of these builds. Look at Paul with that Staff of Mirrodin rounding his build path out. That means that on the backside of that ultimate, he'll have 2 rotations of his next ability cast, so a double knockup potentially, a double water hands could really be a problem for Radiance to try and deal with, and a little bit of extra CDR and penetration does not hurt. I actually don't think I mind this Staff of Mirrodin in the build here for Paul.
I like it a lot. You thought the CC chain was gnarly before. Imagine 2 water spouts coming out immediately. Benji moves in a little bit, but takes a large amount of damage.
Good poke. Yeah, in the backline, that was Radiance that did a lot of that work. Maybe Tingz able to find it, and that's why Adapting is stepping on the gas. Cubo Fred is in some trouble. Can't hit him with the Bat of the Hell. Cubo Fred actually jukes them all, gets out of there with the hammer as well, and forces continued engage. Now Neilma can drop down the ultimate, and Cubo Fred actually has some turnaround potential, force them to proc the ultimate, and he rejoins the group. Paul gets the kill onto Aurora. How do the Knights defend and turn this fight back around? It's a double as Paul finds the kill into Benji here as well. Cubo Fred takes to the sky, rejoins with the squad, but the Knights are somehow still in control.
That was the first time Radiance group up as 5 and looked for aggression, and immediately PK just hold down their S keys. They start walking it out slowly. They get poked out in the early, so they don't want to take the fight, and Radiance chase out a little bit too far, adapting mistimes his ability just a little bit, so Cubo Fred gets the reset from Neil, and then immediately turns it around completely. He deals the damage to adapting, the follow-up is there, and meanwhile, Paul's just running a train on the back line. Aurora gets picked off for free. No one's really able to aggress onto Hebo because they're all looking at the low health Thor.
And CycloneSpin is low health on his own. More good poke, though, from Tingz. This Discordia has been a problem. It's enough to help keep CycloneSpin alive and help him get back out of there, but Scary D still wants more. Blink gets into range and catches him with that sickening strike. That means now the Knights in control. But look at these low health bars. I don't think they feel comfortable sticking around the FG, Mifflin. They're going to back for now, heal back up, and then come back out. And by that time, Radiance should be in position to at least slow him down.
But there's still going to be 40 seconds left on CycloneSpin's respawn. PK is going to have the aggressive position around this Fire Giant, regardless of anything they have to do to return to base, to spend up anything they want to. They have plenty of time, again, to work with. That seems to be the narrative of this game. Slow and steady is certainly winning the race for PK, and Radiance hasn't quite been able to find a foothold of aggression. They aren't able to find their way into the backline. Paul hasn't been the recipient of any damage just yet, and he's still playing completely forward. Aurora has to peek forward, gets plucked himself.
Is already taking a ton of damage. Scary D forced him to leap over the wall, lurking in the waters. Benji has to use his ultimate as well as he falls to too much damage from Paul. Has to think about disengaging. Zatman is up in the sky as well, and he'll choose to head towards the backline, towards Tingz. Gets caught, though, by that strike. He's able to make it out of there by going to the wall, but Cubo Fred gets the two-man dunk that the squad needed. Aurora and Tingz both brought low, but no one actually killed, so Zatman takes up the mantle, takes care of Benji. Good strike from Tingz, slows down the aggression from the Knights, and yet again, too many low health bars. I don't think they like sticking around here in their fight when they're this low.
Is it just me, or is Cubo playing completely cracked today? Every single time someone gets out with a low amount of health, every single time that they're not quite able to finish a kill, Cubo's there in the air, just ready to clean it up and then safely disengage. I'm so impressed by the Thor play right now, but Radiance have been doing a fantastic job of stopping the aggression from PK. Every single time they're trading out one of their members, but this Fire Giant has yet to fall, and that's all due to the fact that Radiance has been diligently defending every step of the way. Now it seems like they realize maybe if we can just let them have Fire Giant, we can try and focus on our defense. Discordia historically incredibly potent on siege defense, so instead they group up around the Goldfree. Now PK are going to know about it. They're going to look to aggress on this Fire Giant.
And there's a big wave over on the left threatening that Phoenix CycloneSpin will go to deal with it. So Knights know they've got plenty of time, or they've got the advantage here on the right-hand side of the map and can try and force this fight. Radiance do have the Oni wave that just spawned up here now, so if they can stall out the Knights for a while, they might be able to reclaim some of this lead. Aurora takes a ton of poke, but Adapting has blinked his way into the backline, uses the beads to get away. This is all about forcing Zatman to give up the DPS on the objective, and Zatman goes on the hunt. Cubo Fred is here to join him. They want to put Adapting in the dirt, and are able to do it. Still, though, they have to leash the Fire Giant for now. Zatman going to back. Might have that ultimate back up in time to rejoin them here around the objective, but Radiance continue to buy some time.
Oh, you say that, but BMT is putting the dirt instantly.
Yeah, it doesn't get much of a chance to buy time there. Paul gets the double kill as well, so the Knights right back in control. Benji in that ultimate, it's fully for the disengage at this point. Cubo Fred doesn't even want to give him that. The wall doesn't find him. Probably lost track of the Jormungandr at this point, but do they even need him? All the Knights streaming down the middle lane. They want this mid-Phoenix they've already opened up, and all that can defend is Benji without his ultimate, and CycloneSpin on this Xbalanque. They're not burning through it too quickly, but still, time is on the side of the Knights here at this point. They know they can lock down Benji with the wall stun. Zatman gets another kill for his 5th one this game. Cubo Fred takes to the sky to zone everyone out. They get right back on to the mid-Phoenix. And even though they're low, they can step forward. CycloneSpin alone for the next 3 seconds. Adapting not too far away. He's got to find some way to buy the squad some time. Paul gets the kill, but now Adapting is here, stuck inside the abduct of the CC chain. And Zatman gets one more with a deicide on the board. The Knights clean up game 1.
What a slow, clinical, well thought out, methodical play style that PK showed today.
Patient, yeah.
No longer is it the aggressive Zapman of old. This is some veteranship shot calling around these objectives. Radiance do a fantastic job of slowing it down, but slowing it down's not enough. Trading out one member to force a back from Radiance, or PK rather, 5 times, that's not enough. You have to do more than that. And a lot of that's due to the fact that Neil Ma on this Khepri was able to stop the dive potential. He was able to keep whoever dove in onto the enemy team alive constantly. I'm just floored and impressed.
Here's what I'll say, though. I think both of these teams would have done enough up against lower-end teams, like potentially an SCC team or something like that, to give them some credit here. But up against these top-tier SPL teams, it wasn't quite enough, and the Knights were able to come out on top. So after that Game 1 victory, time to head back over to the desk and have them break it down a bit more.
Appreciate it, Finch. And you know, guys, here in quarantine, I've been picking up on a lot of reading, getting back into reading some books, and I'm reading Best Gaming Chairs, issue number 1 here, and it's weird, there's only one page in it. It's Maxonomic is all it says on page number 1. Maxonomic, the chair sponsor here in the SPL. You can use code SMITEMAX to get $50 off your chair purchase at needforseat.com. So make sure to jump in. Hey, stick a logo on it, motto, whatever you want on the back of that chair, and pick up your issue of Best Gaming Chairs, issue number 1. I nearly held it all the way through aggro with me to break down game number 1. A game in which the Knights were able to come out on top.
What? Yeah, I guess I could talk about the game and not the promo. I want to do an analysis segment on the promo that I just saw, but we can save that for another day. I don't know how you top that one. I don't know how PK tops this performance either in the late game, because I thought that the way that they really transitioned out of the laning phase and brought it into these true 5-on-5s was very, very impressive, really on the back of what Cuvo was doing on this Thor. But everyone was doing their job nearly perfectly. And this is the type of PK that I want to see consistently, because they're all working so well together. Think about the Fire Giant fight where Zap ults in onto the back line, gets Discordia rooted, and then immediately has to dash out. Cuvo's already in the sky. He's already looking for what's happening on the back end of that fight and find himself a big 2-man dunk to follow up on those that are trying to chase out Zapman. That's premeditated right there, and they played that so well. And what do you know, another game where Paul gets his top 3 gods banned out and then crushes you with the 4th, doing 28k damage. A lot of teams try and ban Paul out. I just don't know that it's worth your time. Like, if you're not going to ban 3 and then pick the 4th, what's the point? Because if you're giving him something that he's this good with, I just don't see the reasoning behind it. He's still top damage, he's still 7-1, and he's still doing the things that we come to expect from Paul.
Well, now I'm scared to see gods 1 through 3 ever let through from Paul, but gonna be the Hebo this time. Gonna be another great game there from him. On the flip side of the coin, though, so much of that pressure and kind of asserted dominance was on Aror, was on this long lane, really adapting, the only one with, I would argue, an attractive KDA by the end of things here. And think back in some of Radiance's games where Aror hasn't had great performance, maybe God-wise on that one game where he pivoted to the Geb. Radiance were kind of worse off for it. I think that this is calculated, clean through and through, and it's now, can the Knights do this consistently, becomes the next big question.
Yeah, that's always the question with this team. But with the way they just played that game, I think that they've got to be feeling really confident. Neil had a phenomenal game on the Khepri. I mean, he had multiple huge saves. The one he had in the mid lane early on in the game that saved Cuvo Fred, that was huge to keep momentum rolling for PK and make sure that they didn't lose anything off of that really nice initiation from Fred in the mid lane when he was defending that tier 1 tower. When PK plays this well, they are one of the best teams in the league, no doubt. And I think that we're going to start to see more and more of this as the year goes on. That was impressive. I don't think Radiance threw that game. I think the PK just played better.
Oh. Agreed. Looked great start to finish from PK. P's and B's, game number 2. The big topic is how heavily do you lean towards Paul? Remember, first 3 bans. We've had the conversation in the post-game stats, so I'm curious now if Radiance realize, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Only picks and bans will tell us maybe how they change up that mindset. If you're not going to move into the hell, the Raijin, whatever it may be, take that away from Paul, what maybe jumps out to where maybe a better suited ban could be here for Radiance?
Thor certainly comes to mind. I don't think you want to let Cuvo reprise that role this time around. That's certainly a first pick potential, but then you're giving Camazotz over to Scary D, and he's going to have one of his priority picks. That's what good teams do to you, man. They make it feel like it's pretty impossible to pick and ban against them. I just don't think that if you let Paul have anyone except for maybe Hell, because Hell is the healer and a little bit of a different conversation there, how much more dominant can he be on Raijin or Merlin than what we just saw on Hebo? Like, what's the effective difference this time around? It's shorter range, sure, but if he's going to play around it that well and PK play around it that well, if you ban Hebo here and then first pick Merlin, at least then you're taking 4 gods off the board, right? That way you're taking 4. Hebo is the one that I don't know the big man is as comfortable with. Raijin and Merlin we know he is comfortable with. Radiance want to stick to that same game plan, but I just don't know if that's exactly what they need to do unless they're going to pick the Hebo themselves, but that's really not a priority pick for any of the players on their team.
It's that risk-reward, rolling the dice game plan. Granted, Knights towards Aror as well. Yemoja and Hercules banned out, and then Ullr, always a great kind of filler ban to get the Ullr out of the pool. Camazotz, though, opting for something similar here. Remember, adapting, though game 1 was kind of a big defeat for Radiance, adapting was the one with a handful of kills, a non-wildly negative slash line. So let's return to it. Knights are going to get themselves Thor one more time, and obviously the big conversation piece is Paul has a lot on the table. BigManTingz has his god pool limited a little bit as well. I'm interested to see where the mid lane now picks start to roll out.
I think the big change that Radiant should be making is just don't give this Camazotz over to adapting. Not that he had a bad game by any stretch, but just give this to Benji and let adapting take something that can effectively dive against the Hebo. I mean, I think that Big Man still had a very good game on the Discordia. I think I'd be going Discordia in an ADC for Cyclone. Something like Chernobog is really smart here in order to keep that pressure on this Hebo constantly. Just give him too many characters that he can't stay safe from all of this dive all at once. So I'd be going Disco here alongside this Chernobog. You expect the Hebo on the other side from PK, but at least you have some better tools this time around to try and dive in.
I like it for BMT. Chernobog as well, still playing with that high win rate. The impact has certainly been prevalent. And even some smart kind of mechanical plays. Even, in the early game, you see a gank happening for your team. You're going to win it. Let's pop the ult, grab a few assists. So a god that can stay relevant and keep some things rolling for him, even despite not being completely active in a lot of the fights. Now Hebo, one more time, locked in for Paul. If nothing else, it's the roll of the dice here for Radiance. After what Paul did in game 1, let's try to take what we maybe learned from how Paul performed in game 1, what we did right, what we did wrong, and try to apply it here to game number 2.
Yeah, I think that PK banning the Yorm is a little bit interesting. I think that they probably would have been better served starting to ban some junglers, because I think it's pretty safe to assume that Radiance is going to make that switch, or at least start banning supports, because you know that there's still Horus up right now. That's a pick that has been heavily prioritized, that isn't being banned. They actually double ban warriors, so they feel, well, one's a guardian, but a solo laner. So it feels like PK thinks that it's more likely that adapting goes back on this Camazotz. I just don't think that I would be on Radiance's side and feel like that is the best way to structure that composition from last time around. I think that you need to change something in order to try and adjust to what PK is doing. Makes sense that they're not going to ban Horus if PK are going to be the ones to pick it. That's very smart. Exactly. I thought that was going to be a pretty big oversight. But if they go with it, I like it. The Jingwei means that it's better against the Horus. Now if Aror picks it, Zap is still safe. But I think I would have preferred to see PK just pick the Horus themselves.
And Kernanos and Hachiman banned out by Radiance, so obviously not rolling the dice quite as heavily on what roles maybe the Knights still need to fill in their lineup. That maybe puts the Knights in a precarious spot where they think they need to extend out of the Jingwei. A run back of the Bacchus here for Radiance. Remember, Aror, tough sledding in game number 1. But what I'm gathering from this Radiance draft aggro is they're thinking that it wasn't necessarily the comp, maybe some play styles. Camazotz in the solo lane now, as Hoonbots will be locked in, presumably in that jungle.
And now you've got Hunbats in the jungle, which does change your entire comp. It makes it look a whole lot better. I like this Radiance comp a lot more. I still think Horus might be better in that slot than Bacchus, but clearly there's some big AoE teamfight damage that Aror really wants with this composition. Love Neil going back to the Khepri. I just don't know if Zap's going to be able to get off to the lead and put the amount of pressure on Cyclone with this Jing Wei in comparison to the Chernabog that he had before. Chernabog much safer than Xbalanque. I think that's going to be key because Zap putting pressure on Cyclone early really opened up the map quickly for Pittsburgh Knights.
Well, the Knights roll through game number 1. Can Radiance bounce back here? Finch and Mifflin will have to let us know.
Thanks, Dolson Aggro. And indeed, Finch and Mifflin here is moving to game number 2. Maybe a bit of a surprise in game 1 that the Knights were able to so cleanly dethrone such a strong Radiance roster. But, Miff, I know you weren't 100% happy with the way that Aror looked on that Bacchus in game 1. What do you feel about them taking it into game 2, especially against the Jing Wei?
If I thought that Aror was going to shift his aggression towards mid very early on last game, it's going to have to be even earlier this time. You're not going to be able to poke out. You're not going to be able to pick this Jing Wei. Yes, you still have the tool in your stun, but anytime you use your flop, she's immediately going to dash out of it. It's a little bit of an interesting pickup, especially considering he took it after the Jing Wei was locked in. If you want to get aggressive in the long lane, there are definitely better picks there. But the issue on this Bacchus for Aror is the CC chain in mid. They still have the exact same ones. Sobek's still there, Khepri still there, Thor, Hebo, all picks that are going to lock you down for an extended period of time, and Auror's really not going to have any true way to escape out of it. So again, it's almost like he really doesn't have any options on where to go in the mid game. He's definitely not killing this Jing Wei, and if the rotations from Neil go towards mid, he's definitely not going to put Paul down either.
Fred getting aggressive in mid. Tingz had a good strike to get away. Didn't we have the same situation in game 1 where Cubo Fred had Tingz low on HP early and potentially in danger of falling? But it's odd, isn't it? Back on this Bacchus, it feels almost insistent from Radiance, even when other really strong picks were available. Hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more of what this squad likes from this Bacchus pick as this game goes on. But adapting and running perhaps the wrong way. Cupo Fred coming for a bit of a wrap-around play, but not Neil Ma and Paul. They'll allow him to escape, though it does cost him the blink in order to do so. But I trust in Aror and Radiance to have a plan with this pick, and even though Jing Wei can obviously get out of the flop, it's not as if the Bacchus is completely ineffective against her. The flop still does good damage to the Jing Wei, and a lot of the times if you chase right away with the belt, you can still get close enough to follow up after. I don't think it's a complete loss of them necessarily. But obviously,
there are certainly ways you can get around it. It's not the best matchup on the planet, but there are certainly ways you can work around it. I really want to highlight Paul's positioning around that red buff. He trusted that Cuvo would very easily be able to solo it as long as they can zone off adapting. So we see that Neil and Paul both chase him out, force the bad positioning, also forcing out the blink in the early. Means that it's going to be a little bit harder getting that online. Once he hits level 5, it's going to be a slightly weaker power spike, assuming that that blink is going to be down. I love it. And then Paul immediately backs up to his own red buff, solos it out, and rotates in as QVL held wave for him there. So both the mid laner and jungler for PK get solo farm on red buffs. But as I'm known to say, one buff invade doesn't make for a lead. It's whether or not you can control it continuously. That's where you start to see bleed coming forward. Now that PK have stolen the buff, now they can easily rotate in, send 4 members, have Cuvo, have Paul, have Zap, have Neil, send all of them there, and force the fight around the enemy red buff.
That should be the call here from the boys, to try and see if they can establish that pressure, keep it up a couple more times, and see if they can find a way to start building up a lead. Because remember how game number 1 went as well, right? I mean, it was relatively even for like 24 minutes. Radiance had built up an experience lead, but they weren't really able to sort of cash in on it. It was like you were saving up something that you thought was going to be rare in the future and never really took it in to trade it for any actual value. So if there's any way that either team can find an actual early game lead, maybe they can hold on to that throughout the game instead of letting it all come down to maybe 1 or 2 fights around the 25, 27-minute mark like we saw in that first match.
Now Radiance has Hun bots in the jungle instead of Camazons. That means that PK isn't going to be able to rely on the exact same strategy of CC chaining immensely one target. If adapting and find the blink in, find the Fear No Evil, that's immediately going to disrupt everything that PK's draft is able to do. It's not going to be easy. The timing's definitely going to be tight, but that's going to be a fantastic disengage tool. It's going to be a fantastic engage tool. But Adapting's been having a hard time already in the early game. Now a level down, Cuvo has Anvil of Dawn online, and it looks like he's already posturing to gank out the duo lane or mid with his positioning.
But looks like he's not going to be able to pull the trigger. You saw the pings coming in as well. They were trying to let Radiance know, or rather trying to let the rest of the Knights know, Cuvo Fred in particular, where they were in lanes. You could find a gank, but the opportunity just was not there for the squad there that time. So Cuvo Fred, rather, just want to call him Adapting because I'm so used to seeing Thor in his hands. Cuvo Fred has to go look elsewhere for some opportunities to try and make some plays. And just like in Game 1, Mifflin, I don't know that anyone necessarily has to be super aggressive in the early game for this draft to work, especially now that the Camazot's over in solo instead of the jungle. Scary D in some trouble, though. I just mentioned the solo, and Benji nearly able to find the solo kill. It's not quite there. Do you give either one of these teams a bit of an edge in the late game, or is it similar to Game 1 where they can both be comfortable wait?
It really and truly is a clean 5v5, but Adapting finds the ultimate onto Cuvo, not quite able to steal away that buff, or rather, yes, he was. I love the play. Now Thor no longer has beads, but once 30 minutes rolls around, once 35 minutes comes through, both teams are equally capable of CC chaining exactly one target. Now Radiance has Adapting on this Hun bots, which means that they don't have to be afraid to engage nearly as much as they were beforehand. Putting Camazots in solo allows them to get a CC center out of their jungler, and now Benji's going to be able to dive a lot more easily. Camazots is able to leverage that defensive build. It's not going to be quite as scary for him to dive onto Paul. Radiance has a much better shot in the late game than they did last game, but I wouldn't say that either team is exactly favored.
No, these should both feel pretty comfortable. And as you were saying, this draft from Radiance this time should mean that there is a few more control tools. So maybe that will sort of trickle down and make life even easier for Aror. Plus, by the time there were really any team fights, he was already behind anyway. But think about it this way. If Adapting and Aror are more of a two-pronged attack on that control lever, then one of them is going to be more successful more often than what we saw in that first game, because you just can't beads or use your CC immune abilities for everything. But Tingz making an early rotation over here to the left-hand side. Now, the Knights are aware that this is going to be happening, so Neomon takes a ton of early damage, does use the ultimate at the last second, but right there waiting for him was that Intoxicate. Aror finds first blood for Radiance on the left-hand side.
What a great rotation there. The entire time Adapting, just stealing away that back camp. If there is no gank potential, at least you stake away a little bit of farm. But with BMT's rotation, he forces out the shell, he forces out the ultimate, and they still get the kill. And there was no counter rotation from PK. Paul was farming in mid. Thor was posturing around the mid camps as well. And now Aror, with a lead, is able to aggress.
Paul, though, still had that ultimate saved in his back pocket, but so did Benji. The bat out of hell forces out the Aegis, and it's enough for Paul to stay alive. Neomon was there, too, just in case he needed to body block a long-range shot with that abduct. He kind of dove in front of the President there to make sure no one got shot. But they did manage to force Paul fully back. Now, Adapting will drop the Fear No Evil, looking for Cuvo Fred over near the blue buff. And it almost works, but that's good peel coming out from Scary D to get him out of there alive. Tingz can't find the Strife or the Unruly Magic, so it falls to Aror. But a good wall interrupts the belt. Cuvo Fred, with 9 lives, escapes it all.
Cuvo really the chosen one there, getting attacked from all directions, a war on all fronts, but he makes it out. Yeah, that truly was Hindu script coming fully into play to get him out alive there. Radiance playing 100% more aggressive than we saw in Game 1, and that's afforded to them by the fact that Camazots can rotate out of soul lane incredibly early and have his impact made, whereas Scary D on this Sobek, he's going to have to wait until he's a little bit tankier, until he's a lot later in the game, and then he's going to be a more facilitator as soul laner. So Radiance are leveraging that incredibly well by fighting around the Camazots, by taking fights around the blue buff, by taking fights around the mid lane, and they're completely mitigating this Jingwei by completely ignoring her. This duo lane shouldn't see any more pressure from Radiance. They've already established that they can take fights on the other 2 lanes. Going forward, I imagine Aurora is going to have very little reason to rotate back and along, and Paul's going to have a lot of reason to be afraid as he no longer has Aegis available. His beads aren't going to come online for another 3 levels. Aurora can continue aggression.
CycloneSpin's in trouble here and left. The dash does not get him into the wall, so he just goes up and comes right back down in place for the reset on the cooldowns. It ends up working nicely. Well played there by CycloneSpin to make his way out of that gank. But now Fred, considering getting aggressive, he takes up to the sky, and Aror is already low. The aggro goes to Neil, so it's an easy dunk down. That man gets the kill credit, but they force out both members of the long lane, and the Knights reestablish some control.
I like that play. Forcing out the beads early on allows the Thor to find the dunk very easily. Doesn't quite connect, but it doesn't matter either. That flop no longer available means that auto attacks are to come through cleanly. So far, both teams are showing a lot more willingness to brawl it out in the early. Scary D still stealing away some camps. He knows he can't get involved in the fight just yet, so he's going to do the best he can to slow down the farm from Radiance. Going forward, Paul is still under no duress. He's just farming out cleanly. He's only been dove onto exactly once, and his Aegis is coming online in the next 20 seconds. Both teams completely comfortable just farming it out.
As they should be at this point. I mean, I don't think they've got any really reason why they have to feel like they have to force anything. If the fight is there, though, if you can come over to left and force CycloneSpin ultimate and beads out, and then leave Aror alone on left and find that killed in too, then I'm liking that aggression from the Knight. But other than that, it's not as if they have to sort of evolve an early game pick so that it can have some kind of late game relevance. And that is if we were talking about something that really only shows up early, as that man gets caught out in left. Neilma is still there with that Scarab's Blessing, adapting, staying close, and not actually proccing it early, but the flop over the wall from Aror is enough to seal the kill. Even finds the belt that CycloneSpin can get onto the board as well with his first kill of the match so far. But how do they make it out of here alive? How do these robbers get back out of the safe without getting caught? It looks like it's way easier than they may have thought. Aror should die to the tower before Fred can get there and deny that kill at the very least. But at least they force him to die in some capacity.
That was a tier 2 dower, by the way, that they were diving exactly 10 minutes into the game. Radiance clearly not happy with how last game went, getting involved much earlier on. I'm loving the aggressive play so far, and it's benefiting them greatly. Now 2,000 gold in the lead are Radiance. No neutral objectives taken. All towers still available. Gold free hasn't been touched. Radiance are farming incredibly well. Adapting's rotating around the jungle, making sure he clears out his own buffs, and then he starts to look for the ganks. Then he starts looking to force out the beads, and he's doing a fantastic job of it. It seems like Radiance are just waiting for Adapting to choose his target, and then they immediately all in on it. It's clean play, but they're going to need to do a little bit more if they want to establish a lead in the early.
And so far, they've been largely chilling. And I gotta wonder what the Knights could do a little bit more to try and slow down this aggression now that it's become clear. I think that this change in composition has done wonders for Radiance to make some of the same picks shine a bit more in different roles or as part of a different unit. I said, what can the Knights do to avoid the aggression? Well, they were the aggressors heading towards purple. Unfortunately, Radiance had a ton of members there, so that means that pressure won't find much. They have to fall back, and Radiance maintain control of their side of the jungle. But if you're the Knights, I mean, how do you respond to Aror and Benji constantly diving you, or all this extra burn from Tingz, or the fear to evil from Adapting? I mean, it feels like there's nowhere safe for them to step.
Radiance has been showing that they're continually going to put their aggression in that long lane, and so far PK hasn't had a clean counter rotation. Cuvo hasn't been there to follow up with the ultimate. Paul's been sitting in mid just farming. If they know that they're going to dive the tier 2, if the rotation comes out just a little bit sooner, or maybe they catch the rotation before it even happens, knowing that Radiance are going to be constantly posturing to try and shut down Neil, you can catch them out before it happens. Be a little bit proactive, rotate yourselves. And that's what we saw from PK there. They're moving up as a unit, grouping up, trying to find the aggression themselves so that they don't have to worry about looking for the counter engage, taking a fight at already a disadvantageous state. But again, Paul can just continue to farm. It doesn't really matter to him. He now has beads and Aegis online. 0-0-0 is the slash line. No one's really aggressing onto him. That's going to be a late game Hebo no matter what, as long as Radiance is content just allowing him to farm.
Seems to be the call. I'm a bit surprised that they've been this cautious around engaging with Paul, but I just don't know if that's where their advantages lie, looking for him in the mid lane when he's so close to the tower all the time. Instead, they've tried to catch members out in the jungle or even look for dives potentially beyond the tier 1 towards that tier 2 once they know that some dashes and the like are no longer available. They got to do something to get some pressure on the Paul, because he's going to go the same build, Spear of Desolation, Lifesteal Boots, likely into the Divine Ruin, and then the percent pen to come afterwards, and hey, why not another Staff of Mirrodin after the way that great game 1 went for him? Even though they've got themselves a nice little 2.5k, almost 3k gold lead, Radiance still might have to do more if they don't want to deal with Paul late.
Cyclone dashes in aggressively, but Neil's already there to rotate in, but the entire Radiance on the back end.
Have set up this fight quite nicely. Now, can they find Neil Maw on the backside too? They can. It's a 2-for-1 in favor of Radiance on the left-hand side, and I don't know if they're done getting aggressive just yet. Sure, BigManTingz in some trouble, and the Knights will come down to grab the red buff as well, but look at Radiance skulking around the jungle of the Knights to see what they can find too. Not sure if they quite grabbed purple, but they will catch Cuvo Fred. Another good wall stun, and should be able to make it back over the wall, but they want Paul instead. The aggression is on, waiting out the Aegis timer. Tings has the strife, and a third kill falls the way of Radiance.
It's almost a complete dynamic shift from game 1. 6 and 2 is the slash line, except this time Radiance is also the beneficiary of farming the map incredibly well. They're also going to be the ones to control the objectives. This has been a lot cleaner a game from Radiance, and I think it really does come almost fully down to this jungle pick. Adapting is looking so much more impactful on this bots because he truly is. He's burning beads consistently. He's able to find the engagements. He's able to force beneficial fights for the squad, and because he's doing that, he's creating space for Aror to play Bacchus a lot more safely. Even though he's engaging, he's not having to deal with the 5-man rotations, the 4-man CC chains from PK, but again, now only 5,000 gold in the lead. That's still pretty sizable 15 minutes in. Radiance can group up, decide to pressure out mid, they can defend towers. They've got a lot of time to work with, especially considering their late game is a lot better this match.
Cyclone's been getting aggressive here on left, even with Neil Maw in his face, putting in good damage. Aror can't find much with the flop, and Adapting has to pay half his HP to Cuvo Fred, who takes to the sky, doesn't find any good targets, and lands right back down. So all this aggression on the left-hand side doesn't amount to much. The blink down for Aror, the ultimate down for Cuvo Fred, but aside from that, everyone can head right back to farming the way they were before. But this has been a much better start to this game from Radiance Mifflin. We're starting to see what this Bacchus pick is like. It's providing decent damage in its own right, and plenty of viable CC there too, looking much better. They're handling Paul by kind of just avoiding him for the most part too. They haven't really fought anywhere near him. It just looks like a completely different game from game 1.
And Radiance is still farming exactly as well as they did from game 1 as well. So their experience lead is starting to grow. Now 2 levels in mid, 1 level over the solo laner. They've got plenty of XP on the board. They've got the gold lead. I think now is definitely the time, if I'm on the side of Radiance, where I'm really trying to push my lead. There are plenty of objectives. Might as well take them. Seems like they're pretty content doing so. Pyromancer's going to fall their way. Absolutely uncontended. No one can steal it away. Scary D was only the person in rotation range. And even then, what's a Sobek going to do? Not much. Radiance are playing this game incredibly slowly, but still they're chipping away at PK. Paul hasn't been able to get involved, and it's probably not going to change very soon, as the dive potential from Radiance is incredibly high. Benji's starting to get some of that tankiness online, so Paul's going to have a much harder time contending with him. There's plenty that Radiance can continue to just pressure. They can start to group up on mid, look for this tier 1 mid tower. They should be favored in the 5-on-5 fight now. Instead, Cuvo's going to go up.
Find the dunk underneath the tower. Doesn't get a whole lot out of that first trouble. Looks like Adapting had to use the beads and the ult, so I am into that. Plenty came out from Cuvo Fred, with basically him just using his ultimate to force it. But I feel like the overwhelming question is, what can they do with what they've forced? I mean, the Fury's down for the 2 minutes. Pyromancer just went down in favor of Radiance, so Adapting can calmly wait another 130 seconds until the beads are back up, and what's really going to force him to fight in between?
Radiance could very easily group up, try and pressure it out. They know that those beads are down. They know the ultimate's down for at least another 40 seconds. If Radiance decide to, they can start pushing down this long lane tower. They can group up on the solo side and take a tier 1 there. At this point, with the lead that they have, they need to start putting the pressure on a PK in order to grow it. If they decide to do that, that's going to make PK force themselves into making a decision. Do they want to defend the tower? Do I want to look elsewhere on the map? Either way, the game state will change, but it seems like Radiance is still absolutely content just farming up for the late game, just waiting it out. If Fire Giant does get pulled at any point, PK have to respond, but it seems like Radiance don't want to force their hand too soon.
Good relic usage from Cubo Fred allows him to get out of there. You even saw Yemoja on the map abducting to get enraged, potentially for Obscurab's blessing, had it ended up being needed in that skirmish, but it didn't. Cubo Fred able to make it out of there, but that is all of his relics now on cooldown, so not just adapting, who will be coming into the party low on resources. It'll be Cubo Fred as well, as we have crossed over the 18-minute threshold beyond the early game at this point, into that mid-game, where the lanes start to break down a bit more. It's Radiance's decision on what music everyone dances to. Will it be a Fury fight, a Pyromancer scuffle, or perhaps a skirmish over near the FG? Radiance largely get to pick.
They do. They're completely in the driver's seat. PK have to play reactively going forward. This is the largest lead we saw at this point in the game in the last 2 games. Radiance can do literally no wrong at this point outside of inting, and I doubt they want to do that as they're already down a game in the set. They could very easily decide to group up and push, but they don't have to be pressed for time. They know that they scale much better into the late game than they did last match, and even then, last match, they were content waiting it out. They have to know, though, that this is a huge lead that they currently have, both in XP and gold. The power spikes are starting to come online as well. Soul Reaver getting picked up by Discordia. Erendite already online for Hunbots. Kamazot's got his tankiness online already as well. Crit coming through for Chernobog. They have so much utility, so many tools that can't be matched by PK just yet, that I have to imagine they would be completely comfortable also forcing a fight. If they decide to, around this gold Fury, which is now respawn, PK are going to have to respond, as the bleed is already starting to become ridiculous, almost 7,000 gold in favor of Radiance. So the fight will have to erupt very soon.
It's tough. Eventually, you have to decide to kind of plant your flag and take a fight, even though no good fights are presented to you. And up until this point, I don't think really any good fights have been presented to the Knights. Radiance have done a really good job of making sure that if they do take one of these little skirmishes, that is favorable for them, that they've got the slight advantage in terms of rotating in sooner or catching someone isolated all by themselves. And why couldn't that be the same case here around this Primal Fury as they start to swarm upon it? Radiance control the center pit. They'll take care of that little bit of vision the Knights had here as well. But everyone is showing up to this party. Zatman's a little bit further out than everyone else, but look how quickly the Primal's being burned. The Knights finally step in to try and contest and force a reset, but CycloneSpin's holding it by himself confidently and correctly. They grab the Fury without any trouble. Cubo Fred has to come peel for Zatman to give him time to get up and over the wall. Cubo Fred on the full disengage at this point, but CycloneSpin finds the root, gets the beads out from him, and chase him all the way underneath the tier 2 tower. Benji can continue to tank at this point, happily, healthily, forcing him up over the wall with that hammer, but CycloneSpin is there to cut off the escape path. Scary D forces the head to turn, and Cubo continues to live, but Radiance have already gotten the objective and can happily move around the map, especially now they're right near the FG.
And the time they just forced chasing out Cubo means that they know he has to back now, so they have the numbers advantage for this Fire Giant. Zatman and Scary D, the only ones in range to defend it.
And they are burning it quickly, but Scary D's here for a chance to steal. Can't quite get it. Radiance secure the Fire Giant. Now Zatman stuck in a bad spot. That's a great ult from Neil, another chance at life, but Benji, yet again, unwilling to allow anyone to back off, finally has to acquiesce, but now he's plucked back in, still has that bat of the hell if he needs it, but Aror with the 2-man flop means it's time for more aggression. Zatman's Aegis avoids the damage coming out from the ultimate, but Benji will not be deterred, gets the kill and the Zatman plucked back in, and will continue his onslaught. He has the sustain, has the life, but finally ends up dropping. It's a 2-for-1 plus FG in favor of Radiance.
That CC chain is still absolutely nuts from PK. They lock him under the tower so long. Paul finds the return kill under Aurora as well.
But long have we waited. Paul activated, gets the triple kill. Cubo Fred dunks back in, but CycloneSpin with the turn and burn. Still alive even this late into the team fight. Will lifesteal up off these minions. And with another wave coming in, only Yemoja alive, they should be able to burn down the tier 2. Maybe even a bit more. I don't know if Neil by himself can stop 2 carries from grabbing this right side Phoenix. What a way to relieve that pressure valve of this slow cooking game this whole time with a huge fight around the Fire Giant.
So clean. I love the decision making. Chase out Cubo, make him back up as late as he possibly can. I'm sure they would have much preferred to pick up the kill, but they do just enough to confirm themselves a Fire Giant. The entirety of PK have to rotate around and make sure that Cuvo can survive as well. So you have complete eyes over PK if you're Radiance. You know where every single member of they are, so you can force the Fire Giant fight. You already have positional advantage as well, so Aror was able to move up and zone them. And then immediately afterward, PK rotate in a little bit too slowly, peek their head in after the Fire Giant had already fallen, so they lose the fight on the tail end and a tier 2 tower. That's a huge swing for Radiance, who is already in the lead. Now 13,000 gold. Fire Giant for over 2 minutes. They've got so much time to work with. They already have a 13,000 experience lead as well. And there's still 2 tier 2 towers left on the map to take. Goldfree is going to be respawning by the time they finish it. This lead for Radiance is going to go from worse to worser.
And how good is their defense even? I mean, Hobwa can be strong because he provides some decent control tools and a high amount of burst, but what about his ranged clear? It's not quite like some of these other mages, like a Merlin or something, who can clear from safety so easily and make life hard. He might have to step up a bit and potentially put his neck on the line as Benji threatens the mid tier 2 tower. Gets a little bit of extra respect from Paul and Cuvo Fred, but adapting is lurking. They're getting baited in, and I don't think they realize great beads and ultimate for Paul in order to respond, but CycloneSpin knows those cooldowns have been stripped, so he steps in, and Cuvo Fred doesn't find anything with the dunk. Paul needed some backup, but there was none to come, so Benji keeps up the chase, finds Cuvo Fred, the backline of the ultimate from Neil, a complete non-factor as Tingz shuts down Zapman as well. That's it for the mid-tier 2 tower. Radiance are rolling and rumbling in. They want the mid-Phoenix, and it's just the tanks to try and defend. I don't think they can up against the might, up against the onslaught from Radiance.
The health bars are high. The ultimates are only available on Scary D. This could very easily be a Titan call, but it seems like Neilma is going to be the target of the aggression. He should fall relatively soon, and he does. Scary D, the only one left to defend for PK, and he falls as well. That's game 2.
That's it. The deicide will be enough for Radiance to close this game out. So we will indeed be moving on to a game number 3 here in Mifflin between these two very evenly matched squads. And could you really have hoped or prayed for anything better? The Knights dragged that game 1 out and were able to close it off. But Radiance this time, with aggression from minute 1, stayed in control the whole time.
It was literally 6 minutes into the game that we saw our first tier 2 tower dive from a team. That's nuts to say, especially considering the pace that we saw in game 1. I thought they were going to be completely content maintaining it, as they had a much better late game in game 2 than they did in game 1, but instead they leveraged the early game. The Camazotz rotates early on to force out the relics on a Paul. They get an early first blood as well. Radiance play it perfectly.
And after that game number 2, I can't think of anyone better to hand the reins of this broadcast over to than my man Dulce, the best ad reader that I personally had the pleasure to meet.
And I can't wait to tell you about this new product we've got for you. Game 3. For one easy payment of a game 1 win and then a game 2 win by Radiance, we'll move on to a game number 3. Free 99 for all you viewers at home. Aggro is going to break down game number 2 and just how Radiance bought that one here with me. And it was a different look, though, from game number 1. Aggression, early on. A better start, much better start from Aror on that Bacchus. Got the ball rolling early here for Radiance.
He did, and it was great rotations all across the map there by Radiance. Benji had his presence all over the map. A lot of camping the duo lane, and you see the difference that putting that Camazotz in solo lane and letting Adapting take that Hunbats really makes for this team. The Hunbat's control is the big difference maker there. Game 1, Neil is free and easy. There's not that much CC coming his way. It's very simple for him to just drop Scarab's Blessing on whoever who needs it and then move on along through the team fight. With Fear No Evil, that pushes people away from Neil. If Neil's too close to them, it pushes Neil and CCs him so that he can't Scarab's Blessing anybody else. And that happened multiple times during the course of this game. Benji is able to dive so much better than Camazotz as a jungler because he just has more farm and he's building tankier. How many times did Paul get jumped on by Hunbats or by Camazotz, use that ultimate, and then immediately get Hunbats, Camazotz, or Chernobog ulted right after the fact? I mean, that's what you have to do, and that's where these triple bans of Hell, Raijin, and Merlin make way more sense. I think that this is the type of style you have to play if you're Radiance, if you want to pick and ban this way. I think they banned the same, but picked much better this time around. And what do you know? They have a really easy 24-minute game.
Agreed. And even the picks, I think, that looked the same from were the same from game number 1 were played differently enough that worked here for Radiance. I think, honestly, that after this game, too, it puts the Knights in an interesting position where now you've seen the great in Paul, and then, not that Paul played poorly, actually, Paul was kind of one of the things that was working here for the Knights. But you've seen the difference in mindset that Radiance are going to bring to the table. So I think this Game 2 performance now changes everything up for Knights in picks and bans for Game 3.
Agreed. I think that you have to try and find a way. Maybe you go first pick and you take the Camazotz for yourself. Again, I don't think Radiance is going to end up going for the Hebo. So if they're going to ban the same 3 gods, you might be able to get a little bit something different. Now that PK are in first pick, this changes their ban so they can open up something a little bit stronger. Yemoja you could leave open, try and give that over to Neil. This gives you a bunch of options, assuming Radiance is going to do the same thing, but there's no guarantees that that's what they're going to do.
Apparently the only guarantee here in these phases is Paul is going to be banned out by Radiance. Technically remains to be seen, but Hercules will be banned out by the Knights. Good reasoning behind it. Aror very powerful on that specific god. Hell, I think kind of withstands maybe the conversation we have about how heavily do you want to ban Paul out. I think Hell as a god, not that the other couple of Paul-centric gods aren't strong, but I think Hell and Paul specifically bring enough to the table to maybe warrant that one continuing to be banned out. Similar to Aror in this Hercules. Was that a centered around this Thor being banned out by the Knights?
It was, because they prioritized it pretty heavily, but this tells me that they want to make sure that they can get something else priority for someone else on the map, and then make sure that adapting doesn't get Thor on the rebound like PK has been getting Thor through the first 2 games of this set. But Radiance decided to ban the Camazotz themselves, so this changes up the entire game plan. Now, do you want to still ban Merlin or Raijin? Do you want to pick the other one? Raijin gets banned. That leaves Merlin now for PK, but is that the direction that you necessarily want to go? I don't know that you necessarily want to first pick that one. Ullr is open. I feel like this is the better call here by PK. Yes, BigManTingz is a very good Merlin player, but this Ullr, you don't want to give it over to CycloneSpin. This is another signature Paul god. It brings you more pressure. I like this idea to first pick the Ullr here by PK.
So you kind of stand from a mindset where even though it's first pick overall here from the Knights, that kind of screams Paul mid lane to you through and through, despite maybe some flexibility for Ullr.
Yeah, we've seen Zap play it, but when you've got Paul on your team and you have Ullr, you just alphabetically, right? It goes Pooler, then Zulr. Like Zap has the disadvantage of starting with
right,
Z.
makes sense.
So you got to give it to the Pooler before you give it to the Zulr, unless you want to go anti-alphabetical, in which case you can do that, but it's a little bit unconventional.
Well, I've been reading, right, Aggro, so I know how the A to Z works here, the P to Z, I suppose.
You're telling me you didn't know the alphabet until you started
before reading Best Chairs. Volume.
Right.
There's a lot of letters in Maxonomic. X is at the end of the alphabet.
And there's A's and there's X's. Yeah, it's all over the place. Yeah.
Right. It's all over the place. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. It's somewhere in that book, I'm sure. Artio, though, I'm going to immediately dig myself out of this hole that you've found a way to put me into. Artio locked in here for the night. Tebow, 3rd game in a row for Paul. Putting the Artio around it. Actually, yeah, great. Yeah, well, there it is. Well, I can read that. Maxonomic.
Okay.
SMITE Max. Yeah, so jump on there. But the Hebo, I think, changes up picks and bans here a little bit, Aggro. Maybe not. Ullr in the mid lane for Paul.
Doesn't look like it. Seems like that's going to be there for Zap. And it does make some sense when you pick it alongside the RDO. This is there to really stop this Bacchus initiation a lot of the time. That cripple field is going to be good if you can get on top of the Bacchus, though a lot of times he's jumping in, and so you won't be necessarily hitting with that cripple field before that. But it forces Discordia dash very easily. It forces Chernobog dash. And now you've got double stance switchers in that duo lane. And what better way to guarantee pressure than by having just double the enemy's abilities at all times in that duo lane. I think that you got to get pressure, though, in that duo side if you're PK, and you cannot allow adapting to rotate over and be as impactful in that long lane as he was in game number 2.
Well, the other jungler, Cuvo Fred, is being focused here a little bit with the Radiance second wave of bans. Pele Susano taken off of the table. Moonbat's still available. You kind of scan the horizon here. Radiance realize that the same for themselves. They'll give adapting one of the power picks in the jungle.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're not banning Hunbats here, I think that means you're 100% taking it, and that's exactly what Radiance end up doing. Nike being hovered, this is something that's been infecting the SCC. They love this Nike jungle pickup. Could be solo lane, but I'd guess this is in the jungle here for Cuvo Fred.
But do you love the Nike jungle pickup? That's what really matters here, Aggro.
Yeah, it's not bad. I think that her passive is still good. It's nowhere near as insane as it used to be, but it's still good. Here's the deal. When you press 4 on this character, you get a massive health shield. And everyone around you, even close to you, not even close, like medium distance from you, it's a massive slow that lasts 6 seconds. It's a 40% slow for 6 seconds. You can read your entire best chairs at volume 1 in 2 times over. It's only 1 word, but it takes a long time to get out of this slow. Discordia, it really can't escape from Nike at all, in my mind. That cripple will be effective, but this is just more frontline to protect the Hebo. That's really all you need. If there's a Nike jungle composition, I think this is a pretty decent one.
Amaterasu will round out the Knights' picks here. All 10 locked in aggro. Is there one that maybe jumps out to you as a favorite going into Game 3?
Chernobog's been undefeated so far this set and today, I believe. I think I got to lead with the Chernobog. I think Cyclone just looked so much better on this pick than he did on that Xbalanque. Big Man's back on the Discordia, adapting back on the Hunbats, and Aror back on the Bacchus. I think I'm going to go Radiance, but Cuvo could pop on the Nike.
Lots of potential here for both teams. For one final time today, we'll go down to your casters to round us out.
Of course, the set that gave us our first base race of the year must come down to a game number 3 here, Mifflin, in the SPL. Finch indeed joined by Mifflin, as we are going to wrap this whole day up and this set up here as well with a Nike in the jungle. You heard Aggro kind of begrudgingly go over some of the positives of this pick. Where do you land down on this important last pick here for Cuvo Fred?
I like Nike in of the god of itself, but I much prefer her in the solo lane where she can stack that passive a little bit more quickly. She gets it online when she kills 200 minions, I believe, somewhere around that range. Having her in the jungle means that you're sacrificing a lot of early game damage potential. You're not going to have that huge impactful CC ultimate that something like Hunbots will bring, but you do bring a fantastic dive tool. However, Cuvo's not going to be diving very much, as he's not going to be playing through this dual lane nearly as much. Zapman knows that that's where Adapting's going to want to play, so they pick an aggressive dual lane, PK that is, in this RDO and the Ullr. Double Stance Switzer, as Aggro pointed out, is going to have literally double the abilities that Aror and Cyclone are able to bring, so they should get the lane pressure very easily. I imagine PK's strategy is going to be revolving around ganking the red buff, trying to steal it, maybe stealing away some purple buffs in the early game. But for now, she's going to have to just farm up, gets that ultimate online, and until then, she's nearly a sitting duck.
Nike brings a lot to the table, but certainly that ultimate is what you want to lead with, and it just adds so much in terms of allowing her to dive and then turns into an unviable target kind of in the middle of the dive through all the extra health shield. And you can no longer afford to decommit from trying to kill the Nike because of the slow, very strong, what she's able to do. Though, of course, so much of that does come from being able to reliably build health in your build. It just does a bunch of damage if you're building damage, and that's nothing to scoff at either. We've seen Scream pilot the Nike jungle and put up some big damage numbers with it too, so we'll see which way Cuvo Fred leans a bit more into as this game goes on. But we are already seeing the Knights do exactly as you wanted, aggress around this aggressive long lane that they've drafted here with the RDO and the Ullr. Already invaded once, still have their purple buff waiting in the back pocket if they want to grab that too. And really, there's not much Radiance can do except let this happen for now. Or maybe they could go gank Scary D early. The knockup is there with the Vamana from Benji. And I don't think Scary was expecting this one to happen. The leap is there for the slow. The last basic attack means that Adapting secures first blood in response to the Knights.
Man, rip and pep, buddy. You never expect the level 3 gank to come towards solo lane. It's almost always targeted towards that long lane, but instead Adapting decides to flip the script just a little bit, put Scary D down and under. Now Benji's going to have the easier time getting online earlier. He can start proxying a little bit earlier on as well. He's going to be able to control his blue buff very easily. And once Vamana starts rotating out, that means that it's going to be very hard for Paul to be playing that Hebo. A lack of mobility outside of that water carpet means that Benji's going to be able to chase him down, especially considering we see movement speed in that build so often. It's going to be hard. Colossal Fury comes online. It's a CC immune baby, literally walking you down and stomping on your head. Not much Paul's going to be able to do outside of try and damage race him, maybe pick up a Divine Ruin very early on like he has been, and mitigate some of that healing.
CycloneSpin in trouble yet again. Zapman hit him with everything he could hit him with. It just wasn't enough for the kill this time. CycloneSpin even holds on to the beat there. Bravery from the young lad over in the long lane. The good news is, though, that he can still stick around for a little bit longer to try and contest, but do you really want to step up against it, up into this dual lane? They'll send Aror over by himself to start considering the purple buff invade, but Adapting is here again. After getting started off well with that gank in solo, he's here to defend the purple, make sure the long lane doesn't get too far out of control. There's a lot you gotta do when you're rocking in the jungle.
I like that play. They know that PK has so much pressure in this long lane that Adapting really doesn't have any option but to rotate over and confirm that purple. It strips away the farm from PK, but at the same time, CycloneSpin didn't get any of that experience, so he's going to be falling behind just a little bit regardless. It's a rough tightrope you have to follow in that I can't let the enemies get the farm, but my ADC really needs it himself. So Adapting makes that hard decision and just goes ahead and confirms it for his own team. Now it's really on CycloneSpin to get it going forward and make sure that he does get some of that farm online. It seems like Aror is willing to rotate out a little bit early on to make sure that Cyclone doesn't fall behind despite that, which is, again, a very smart response in the play, but he's going to fall behind himself instead. But if you have to choose one person to fall behind, almost always the support.
Yeah, sometimes even if you don't have to pick someone, it seems like we've picked the support, right? When things are going well, still don't really want supports eaten or anything like that, but that's just the way it's gone here in this game, where they're happy to try and sacrifice a bit if they can. Already, though, Zapman has that Transcendence finished and is working on stacking the Devourer's Gauntlet finish for CycloneSpin as well. And if only one of them has to try and operate with limited mobility, I gotta think that favors the Ullr. Meanwhile, Kivo Fred making an early gank. They're trying to catch Benji out, looking for the proxy farm. And by trying, I mean succeeding. A celebratory America ult from Kivo Fred there on the backside as they punish Benji.
Benji got a little bit overconfident, gets off to a real hot start, starts proxying before he even has the ability to get some defense online. He's working towards what looks like it could be a Breastplate of Valor. Not quite ready yet. It's not going to help you out either if Paul's the one rotating in. That damage output was so high. Gets silenced as well on the dash, so he doesn't even have the opportunity to use his ultimate. That's a clean rotation to shut him down early, and now Scary D's back to a state of equity. He doesn't have to worry nearly as much, and he doesn't have to worry about getting 1v1'd anymore either.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate drop for Benji, but I think that it's one that you don't mind too much from him. I think looking for the proxy farm when you have your lead in lane is about the best thing that you can do. How do you feel about the way that these solo laners use their time once they have been given some kind of advantage over here in the short lane?
There's really two schools of thought. You can either force someone to rotate to your lane like Benji did and pray that you survive the multi-man rotation and hope that your team can get some sort of lead elsewhere on the map, maybe move in towards gold for your pressure down a tower. Or you can start to use your lead and rotate out and try and help your laners in their own right. You can go into mid as the Savannah and try and pressure the Hebo, at least force an ultimate or maybe an active. It seems like Benji's still got a slight XP lead, so he's going to continue pressuring that lane. I don't imagine he stops proxying, but if Radiance continue to rely on Benji to be a suction cup for all the pressure, they have to start making plays elsewhere on the map.
Yeah, especially on a pick like Vamana, I think this is the right call from Benji. 9 times out of 10, it's going to take too heavy of a commitment for you to stop him. Between the Colossal Fury, between that dash with the knock-up on it as well, he has so many good tools for escaping, even when he puts himself out of position, that I like this. Benji does go for the proxy, but as soon as he gets it, he starts rotating. Might even be able to find a speed buff invade, and of course my man checks it out and realizes he can grab that one away. So not bad work, really, I think, even considering the spill that Benji took earlier.
That hurts my heart as a jungler. It's the worst feeling on the planet when you're getting invaded on speed buff. Even worse when you know it's not the enemy jungler that did it, it's the soul laner. It almost always tilts me, and I imagine that...
Even less your fault, right?
Yeah, even... That wasn't me! What are you doing? Stop him, Scary! But unfortunately, he just can't. Benji's got a slight lead, and he's leveraging it incredibly well. Stealing away that speed buff is going to slow down Cuvo's farm. It's going to make sure that maybe Radiance looks to invade it continuously, and use that lead in the short lane. They know that Vamana is going to be a better fighter for the next couple minutes, so might as well fight around him. Having that speed buff be invaded is really rough for Cuvo.
I think Yemoja just used the dash there to help confirm the buff, but even still, a good juke onto that ultimate from BigManTingz means that Yemoja will survive. And man, speaking of tightropes, you talked about it earlier, I think, for these junglers, how they divvy up their farms. Supports walk a tightrope in this early game, desperately trying to find what farm they can, and Yemoja does a good job getting out.
Neil's playing incredibly passive considering that they went for this aggressive dual lane start. Usually you'd expect him to see just sitting in this long lane trying to keep the pressure up on Cyclone, but instead he's rotating out, trying to help Paul out, make sure he gets his farm online, and he knows that Paul's probably a pretty juicy target for this gank from Adapting.
Yeah, Adapting new as well. Already has Paul in his sights, forces that crushing wave out from him defensively, and that's great work from him to be able to disengage so well. But now there's 3 members in mid, the Colossal Fury for the turnaround. He's looking for Cuvo Fred, not as tanky as your Nikes normally are, but doesn't want to commit all the same. Aror here too, but is able to disengage. A Scary D goes for a buff invade of his own, strips away the speed. Now the collapse is here. He still has that dazzling offensive if he needs it to try and find a way to get out of jail for free as Benji keeps up the chase, but with Adapting peeling off, Scary D is likely out of there.
Scary looks at Cuvo, says, hey man, I'm sorry I dropped the pressure there. I'm going to go ahead and invade speed buff and make it up to you, and he does incredibly well. Now Yemoja diving deep on a BMT, Zapman there to confirm the red buff. That's well played, but Cyclone uses the ultimate.
He wants to try and catch Yemoja out, but that's twice now that Neil has put on the skates and pulled off some excellent moves to avoid getting locked down. He's got some turnaround potential. The cripple field means no escape for Adapting, who's low on mana anyway, but they don't have the last bit of damage. What a turnaround from Radiance. In comes CycloneSpin for a second kill to make it 2 for 1 as Cuvo Fred joins the fray. But now that Paul is here, this has double kill written all over it. CycloneSpin gets one in his own right and continues to try and escape. As Paul wants to close the gap, he ends up giving the kill over to Cuvo Fred instead, and ends up being a 3 for 3 across the map.
Yeah, I much prefer a fed Nike to a fed Hebo. Paul already picks up 1 kill there. Might as well not give him another one. I like that decision making, but again, that's a little bit of an overcommit from Radiance there. Just staying in the fight a little bit too long. They pick up their kill. They should probably back up afterward, but luckily it's an even trade. Now 4 and 4 are the slash lines for both teams. Radiance has a slight gold lead. No real neutral objective pressure just yet from either team, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. PK is completely comfortable, again, farming to late game, especially considering that Nike ultimate, or Nike passive rather, is going to come online with time. And Paul's going to be even stronger on this Hebo than he was normally, just because he's going to have that additional movement speed and power. Gold Fury probably won't even see any real fight potential until both teams have their second relics online, maybe around the 15 to 16 minute mark.
That man under pressure. It's already over at this point. Fear no evil. A little bit too easy onto a hunter with no beads at that point is Benji trying his best to defend his own speed buff up on the top side. I do want to give some credit to Neil, though, for that prolonged engagement on the left-hand side. I know he died early, but not as early as he could have died in that last fight. I think that did kind of help force the hand of Radiance for that overcommit, and they want to force the hand onto Adapting, locking him down in the jungle, and willing to commit a bit more as Cuvo, but not able to lock him down. CycloneSpin punishes Yemoja for the overcommit. Sorry to Caster's Cursia, as Cuvo Fred has to use the Sentinel Zeus defensively just to escape. Radiance, it feels like, just that one step ahead of the Knights here all game.
It's really been off the back of these rotations. Cyclone picks up 3 kills very early. Adapting's been having his pressure all across the map, a part of 100% of the kills for Radiance. They've been playing off the back of Adapting and waiting for him to show up continuously. It's exactly like Game 2. They don't want to fight without their monkey, so they certainly won't. And Adapting's been positioning himself around the map for every single engagement incredibly well. He's been able to not only maintain his farm, but also keep up consistent pressure. Cuvo's been able to do similar levels, but he hasn't quite seen the same success that Adapting has so far.
Cold Fury being considered by the Knights. You almost forget that they had the pressure to start with in the long lane, as Radiance are in control now. The Fury has fallen to half, and Paul is here for the confirmation with that ultimate. The Knights secure the objective, but they lose Yemoja to do it. So far, that's still favorable. Cuvo Fred has his beads forced out as well. It looks like Radiance aren't going to be able to get much more on the back of this fight, especially with Paul fully retreating.
Adapting didn't look like he was willing to give up the chase just yet, but now Radiance have the aggressive positioning around the tier 1 tower. Your mid tower, that bastion of safety that you once had, yeah, it's gone now. Radiance clear it out very easily off the back of a pick, though they do trade the gold free out in response, but still 2,000 gold in favor of Radiance, so I'm sure they're not quite pressed about it, and Pyromancer becomes a much easier target. You don't have to worry about that neutral objective in gold free on the duo side of the map, where you already know that PK should be favored in the fight, especially considering that Zapman has a slight lead and he's playing the more aggressive pick.
And doesn't this kind of give you an idea of just how big of a difference pacing can make in a game? This game is pretty close, just like Game 1 was, but it feels like there's been so many more back and forth battles for it. CycloneSpin ults back in, can't find much more there, so the Knights disengage, defending their buffs successfully on the Chaos side of the map. But this has been about different places where the teams have pressure and how that balancing act has gone between the two of them. The long lane pressure belonged to the Knights, but the side lane pressure over on the solo side belonged to Radiance off Adapting and Benji. And despite that, it is the Knights that are looking for the Pyromancer on the right-hand side. They're burning it quickly. No one will get their head in from the Radiance team in time to contest. And another objective belongs to PK.
People often forget the shred potential that Amaterasu's passive affords you. That Pyromancer fell so quickly, no one was even in range or had time to think about where's PK at. Well, they're doing the only other objective on the map. Now Radiance's small lead is going to have a much harder time growing, as if they want to expand it through objectives, they're going to have to group up and push something that PK is going to have a much easier time defending, a la tower. So I imagine this game returns back to a state of farming for both squads as they wait for this gold free to respawn.
Let's talk about these builds a bit here, Mifflin. Things are looking a bit different between Zapman and CycloneSpin. I'm holding my breath because Adapting's showing some attention, like he wants to gank on the right-hand side, and he absolutely does. Scary D can't get away from the fear no evil, so another successful gank for Radiance on that right-hand side. I was going to touch on these builds. We might have to wait a bit if they want to look for a bit more action, but after getting the tier 1 in tower, Radiance relents, and we can start to move around this map here a bit more as we examine just what options Radiance have before them.
And if you want to talk about the builds, I'm your man for it, but we might have to hold that thought one more time as aggression erupts in that long lane.
Yeah, Zapman is in some trouble, and it's CycloneSpin that wants to make it double. Can't quite lock him down, though. Able to escape is the Ullr on the left-hand side to get back underneath the tier 1. But now all of Radiance are on the left-hand side, so they might as well aggress. Thorns are popped, and the target for it will be Yemoja. There's an apple there to keep the Doctor away, but it will not lock down Neil. Tings gets the kill for it either way. Left side tier 1 tower should fall too, as Radiance continue to be able to basically step wherever they want to in the map right now. Only 2,000 gold in the lead, but doesn't it kind of feel like more?
It really does. It seems like they're not looking at the numbers even in the slightest. They're taking fights everywhere around the map, but they're taking advantageous fights. They are always grouped up as more members. They always have the numbers advantage going into it. Now, CycloneSpin getting chased out by Scary.
And there's the numbers advantage as Radiance come in from stage right and provide the necessary peel. But I don't think the Knights are done yet. They popped the Frenzy at this point, so they want a little bit more blood. BigManTingz is the next member that's in trouble, but Adapting, waiting to try and bail him out. The Fear No Evil gets Tings just barely out of focus. Now Benji could pick up the mantle and look for a bit more action. Another apple off the map mark from Tings, but not the end of the world, as they've already done enough to get everybody out alive.
Now 3,000 gold in the leader, Radiance. Gold Fury spawns in exactly 1 minute. Divine Ruin already online for Discordia, as is for Hebo. That means that Benji's going to have a lot harder time sustaining up through these fights. He's not got that pure healing that Colossal Fury is going to afford him, and the damage output from PK is going to be only expanded on if Scary D decides to focus on Benji in this fight as well, creating even more damage shred. It's gonna, if they decide to, PK can immediately, once Colossal Fury is popped, back up off the fight and peel out for Paul. It's going to be very hard for Benji to choose the right opportune time to start his own dive, but CycloneSpin in the air.
He's going aggressive. He's about the only member that's this far forward, but I don't think the Knights recognize that they're still worried. A great root from that pre-placed first ability sets down the lockdown onto Neil, and now a chance to threaten this tier 2 tower, at least for some rotations out from the Knights. There's the teleport coming. It's got to get here quicker as the burns start to come through too quick. Scary D shows up, takes a ton of damage from CycloneSpin, who hasn't blinked yet. They backed up to reset aggro, take the tier 2, and force the ultimate out from Scary.
Cyclone is a literal Gatling gun at this point, taking single fights, able to blow up Scary the second he teleports in, blows up the tower itself. Gold Fury respawns. Cyclone's there being a Gatling gun again. It's already on a quarter health. That's absolutely nuts. The lack of respect that Cyclone shows there, just immediately ulting to chase out that fight. I love it. I really do.
And he's working on the crit at this point, too. We saw the short sword likely going to be turning into a rage for CycloneSpin. It did. And who's going to be the one that stops this crit build down from him? I mean, Thorns could still be built by Neil. Maybe a shell as well to try and get some stacks up when it's upgraded and block those basics. But I don't know. I think at this point, CycloneSpin can feel pretty comfortable to kind of lean into that, maybe get a Deathbringer a little bit later on and do plenty of damage. Whose job is it going to be, Myth, to try and slow down this Turnabog?
It's really 100% on Scary D to start to find that dive into the back line. He has to slow him down. I imagine we see some anti-crit items come online, and he just has to sit there. He doesn't necessarily have to kill Cyclone, but he has to create enough space for Paul, for Zapman, for them to move up and start dealing their own damage. As of right now, Cyclone is left unchecked. He's going to continue doing what we saw there, which is tear down literally anyone that stands in front of him. His damage output's only going to become higher. This is a very early rage pickup, so he's going to get that stacked very quickly. They have to be worried about that additional crit coming online.
Fear No Evil barely catches Scary D, ends up dashing and having the Dazzling Offensive forced out, but Radiance should be able to start off the FG with this space they've afforded themselves. Benji and Tingz stepping forward to zone. Aror locks down Scary D in the backline, but Neilmon now knows exactly what's going on. The Fire Giant was being looked at, so they drop it. They look for the fight instead. Big knock-up from Paul creates space for Neilmon to find his way out, but Radiance, without missing a beat, swap targets. They grab the Pyromancer in the back. Meanwhile, Cubo Fred being bullied a bit by adapting. Radiance couldn't do the FG, but they still managed to get something.
Yeah, the silver medal in that Pyromancer are going to get them even more of a lead now. They can return to base, spend that gold, leave a little bit more quickly than they once could before. Seems like they're not really going to keep pushing their luck around that Fire Giant. They saw that PK still had the capability to fight into them, despite a close to 6,000 gold lead in favor of Radiance. So instead, they go ahead and return back to their lanes, and they're going to wait for that next pick opportunity to open up Fire Giant going forward. Again, it's really on Scary D to start getting some farm online, get that Void Shield up, so get some Spectral Armor rolling out so you can start shutting down Cyclone. Paul has still been largely unchecked this entire game, 2-0. He's already got tons of penetration online, anti-heal, Soul Reaver's already up. He's going to be able to blow up the tanks, he's going to be able to blow up the carries. It's going to be very hard for anyone to really want to commit to diving him, but Radiance has the answer inside of Benji. Once Colossal Fury comes online, he can very easily just hold down that W key, hold down left click, and pray for the best. It's going to be a damage race in these team fights, truly. If both teams have potential to dive high priority targets, it's on which team can kill it first.
Right, and that's how a lot of these fights break down, you know, is that you have to kind of think of them as two different fronts, as Cubo Fred has the BH forced out by the ultimate from adapting. We're wondering just how tanky he would go, and it looks like the Void Shield doing a lot to help him out there. It didn't take quite that much damage from adapting, and still holds on to his ultimate as well, but he has to give up the beads. But we talk about those multiple fronts for those fights, Mifflin, and you're right. I mean, if two members dive and they're looking to kill two in the back line, but the other team does the same, it's about who wins that 2-on-2 or the 1-on-2 or whatever it is first. It could turn around and collapse onto the other. And in this situation here for Radiance, they are favored. Cubo Fred lurking in the back, because that man's already taken a ton of poke. And so
That's
Benji
huge
wants to go
damage on
ahead
his
right
map.
to the back line. Yeah, he's going to blink in, pop the Thorns. He's ready to rock right away. The Colossal Fury means that Paul has to use his ultimate just to disengage. They can't quite get the peel, but now, just as I said, they can head back to collapse into the rest of this fight here for the rest of the night. And who is that member? It's Yemoja. They're looking to sandwich. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, they find Cuvo. Fred again. CycloneSpin gets the credit, and they punish him nicely. Zatman does use the Aegis well in order for him to escape, but now Scary D's been left on an island. They force him out too, and start heading right back towards the Fire Giant pit.
That fight showed me exactly one thing. Benji has reached critical mass. He doesn't care who's standing between him and his target. He's able to dash in and just continue moving forward. Now PK have to defend.
Fire Giant burned already, and Radiance grab the objective. Now that leaves Scary D way in the back of the fight, and there is no lifeline coming. Adaptin gets that kill, completes the killing spree, and Radiance should be able to find some time to back here now, Myth, spin some of that gold, and now look at the map that's in front of them. 2 tier 2 towers, all 3 Phoenixes up and ready for the take.
And Fury is spawning in 10 seconds. They could decide to go for it first and then go ahead and move in. They have a ton of time to work with, as Fire Giant's going to be about 3.5 minutes until that buff falls off. Their siege potential on the side of Radiance is enormous. Benji's going to be able to create a ton of space. Adapting's got one of the best engages in the game, and BMT's already shown that one hit of Strife is able to drop just about anyone down to half health. Aurora's going to have a very easy time finding the flop as well once the entirety of PK have to group up and defend. It's going to be hard going for them to stop the aggression. My eyes are on Paul. He's going to have to find a fantastic dive. Scary as well. They're looking to fight outside of the Phoenix, I believe. They have to look to really blow up CycloneSpin. They have to blow up BNT and make sure that they don't have any time inside of the objective.
Well, you asked for the Spectral Armor earlier, Myth, and it looks like it's there for Scary D. That's to try and deal with CycloneSpin a bit, who elected not to go with the Deathbringer. It's the Wind Demon into potentially the Poison Star there next for him to try and extend that crit build out a bit more. Well, Scary is going to certainly be on Cyclone watch here as the tier 2 tower in mid is down. Radiance are in position to threaten left with a 3-2 split. But Adapting moving over to join the squad, and Benji still drawing attention in mid, should set up a favorable 4v2 on this left-hand side. Zatman gets hit by the Intoxicate early. Fear No Evil comes out into Yemoja, but he lives through it all too, and now Scary D comes out with a dazzling offensive. Zatman cuts down Adapting early, so Benji wants to get involved himself, trying to lock down Paul, but the Crushing Wave allows for the disengage. This fractured start of the fight from Radiance hasn't worked yet.
Adapting just moved up a little bit too quickly, as did CycloneSpin, getting caught out, not quite catching the message for the disengage. Now Radiance have to run away as PK chase every single one of them.
And they should chase here at this point. You asked for the fight outside the Phoenix when it was a 5-on-5. Well, what about a 5-on-3 where they're this heavily favored? Tings is a little bit further back than everybody else, but the Knights with the low health bars don't quite feel comfortable, as Benji will head back towards that left side Phoenix and burn it down. But the Knights are not done aggressing. They want Tings as Cubo Fred finds the kill there. Aurora comes in with, let's try and help. They can't do the tier 2 yet because the tier 1 is still standing, but now they've got this collapse without the cripple field though, and without enough damage. Aurora survives it all and should be able to still stay standing.
Benji's play there is so smart. He peeks over his shoulder as he's getting chased, says, oh, you guys gave up on me? Well, I'm going to go finish that one objective that we weren't quite able to. Picks up the Phoenix, and what was a clean Fire Giant siege defense turns into, at least we got a Phoenix, guys, and the most valuable one, the one furthest away from the Fire Giant. It's going to be much harder for them to defend the Fire Giant on respawn.
And Aurora kept them in combat long enough for CycloneSpin to come back up and use that Living Nightmare to re-engage. So Adapting gets the first kill onto Neil. That's going to force Scary D into the dazzling offensive. Does get away from that ultimate from Adapting, and now that Cubo Fred is here, he can help. But the belt isn't quite enough to catch up to Scary D. What about Cubo Fred instead? Well, Paul is here to say hello now as he shuts down the Bacchus. This long, drawn-out engagement has finally seemed to settle, with a left side Phoenix going down for Radiance.
Now Fire Giant exactly 1 minute 15 seconds away from respawning. Radiance are going to be completely comfortable just stopping their aggression right now, getting the ward coverage around the objective, and positioning themselves to pick out anyone who tries to rotate in. If they get the ward advantage early on, that means that PK is going to have to face check Fire Giant on respawn. No one really on that side has a very safe or easy time doing it. Scary D's already been shown to be incredibly squishy. Neil has been shown to very easily caught out by the extensive CC from Radiance. They're going to have to move in as a 5-man unit while simultaneously contending with these fire waves continually pushing down that long side of the map. It seems like PK identified that early on and they decide to push it out as quickly as they can to get ready for this Fire Giant, but time's ticking, only 30 seconds left, and now ward coverage is going to start to come online for Radiance.
Yeah, at this point, Radiance should feel pretty comfortable just heading back over to the Fire Giant pit and making a play happen there. The Knights desperately grabbed what farm they could from their side of the map, but it's a question of if they'll even step out and try and contest, especially when they have to deal with minions so far over there on the left-hand side. Fire Giant 10 seconds away from spawning, and Relic's still down for a lot of members. No beads for Cuvo, no Horrific for Neil, no beads for Adapting or Tingz either on their side of things, but Radiance, with this much of an advantage, will still happily take any fight that the Knights choose to give them. It looks like the Knights do want to be here for this party, even though they got guests showing up in the left lane.
If Radiance decide to just not even fully commit to the Fire Giant and just extend the fight and keep 5 members of PK here, that Fire Wave not quite pushed up enough, and it's about to be a stacked Fire Wave as well. That's going to start flooding to the base. Radiance has time to play with, and they certainly can, and that's going to only continually stack the pressure on a PK. PK is the one who's in the driver's seat now, or not the driver's seat, but the hot seat rather, as they are on a timer. They've already spotted it out that Phoenix is respawning soon. If someone does back to defend it, now it's a 5v4 on the Fire Giant, which is going to be enhanced in about 2 minutes if Radiance decide to wait it out. That's a hard spot to be stuck in. Scary D's the first one on the scene to defend. He still has that teleport available to get back in as soon as he needs to, but PK is playing so far back.
Yeah, they would need him now as the Fire Giant's already at half HP, and CycloneSpin and Tingz can stay on the objective. The Knights are entirely zoned out at this point, and Radiance, in a heavily favored fight, let's be honest, take that Fire Giant perfectly around Scary D being forced to back. Now they can group up and grab this last tier 2 tower on the right-hand side as well. Scary D still pushing up those fire minions so that hopefully they can defend that left side Phoenix a bit easier, but they got to hurry up and get their feet set for this right side defense as Radiance continue to push.
PK is looking for second verse, same as the first. They have to defend outside of the Phoenix. We've already seen that the damage output onto the objective is way too high. That first Phoenix, they got, maybe Radiance got 3 auto attacks before PK was able to push them out, and it already dropped it to about a quarter health. Now they know they have to fight incredibly quickly, but at the same time, their left Phoenix just now respawns with 2 fire waves coming down. Scary D's not in position to defend with a stack of Radiance already knocking on the door.
Plus, Benji pulled a couple members over to mid, so the Knights aren't as set for this defense as they'd like to be. Yemoja buys them some time, so now they're back in place as Benji gets poked to half HP. That's a late-game Ullr and a late-game Hebo saying hello as Paul puts in that last bit of damage. Scary D will step forward to continue pushing up these last few fire minion waves that they have to worry about, and so Radiant once again re-engage. Yemoja, the early target, as Aror sticks on the Zapman. Fear No Evil hits multiple members, but still no lives have been claimed. Radiance, up until this point, have just looked for damage. Now they can start to put some DPS into the actual Phoenix. Benji holds onto the aggro, but Scary D looping around at the back. That's what Radiance are worried about. Where is this last extra member? But Scary's still patient, not going to take his moment just yet.
What a smart time to back off from Radiance. They know that they'd already expended a lot of their resources. 4 ultimates down, the siege not quite successful, and Scary D rotating around the back end means maybe we should back up here, reset, get ready for the next one. They could, with the time that they have, just play around pushing out this Pyromancer, pick up the Primal Fury. But with Fire Giant, you're always looking for that power play. I'd expect we see them group up as 4 and split the push down mid onto this weaker Phoenix in the long lane, especially considering it is, again, the highest priority Phoenix, as it's the hardest to defend on the subsequent Fire Giants. My eyes constantly on whether or not Benji can get into the backline before taking that huge amount of poke that we just saw. If he's able to, just zone out Paul, zone out Zapman. It doesn't even matter if he falls. He just has to create enough space for a Phoenix to fall, or enough space for Adapting to find a Fear No Evil. The second that happens, Radiance has a clear goal in that if we find a pick, that should be game.
And they will come over and grab the Primal just as you said. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I wonder just how much pressure really is on Scary during this next team fight, Mifflin. I feel like something's got to be done to keep track of where CycloneSpin is. The problem is that you just have too many places to turn your head. Aror is diving onto Zapman. Meanwhile, Benji's diving onto Neil. There's just too many places where Radiance are pulling their attention.
Cyclone right now is going to have a much harder time getting involved simply by nature of being a hunter on Siege. He's going to be constantly looking to hit the Phoenix rather than Gods. So Scary D can shift his attention if he so chooses towards BMT, towards some of these more team fight oriented Gods, so that he doesn't really have to contend with Cyclone. That being said, if Cyclone wants to move up, he's going to have 5 members staring him in the face.
Benji taking the brunt of the damage here this time as the poke from Pittsburgh Knights does prove to be a little bit too strong. I don't know if Radiance are going to be able to just walk in S5 up against this draft from the Knights. I know Radiance has been in control all game long, but I don't know if it's been quite enough to create enough distance in the late game. Now that we're 32 minutes in, I mean, just about everyone on the Knights is 6 slotted, but Scary D might have been caught out. Radiance went for a loop around, dropped the Fear No Evil, and it's just not enough damage to burn out Scary D. They need a slightly better target than that for that trap to work. And look at the Knights recognizing there might be some weakness, smelling a little bit of blood in the water. They're stepping outside of the Phoenix and looking for some delayed backs or rise targets to try and get some kills.
The Fire Giant buff has fallen off at this point. It's going to respawn in the next 45 seconds, but I love that attempt from Radiance. The cheeky play to back up and then loop back around. Fortunately, Scary D gets the ultimate off just in time to not be hit by the Fear No Evil. So PK, now knowing that Fear No Evil is down, one of the best team fight ultimates that Radiance has, they go ahead and take that mid tower. They can go ahead and pick up this Pyromancer. Fire Giant spawns in 30 seconds. If they get the defensive positioning, this game's reset to just about even. PK could be the aggressors on this next Fire Giant push. They don't have to worry about their Phoenix anymore. No more fire waves to contend with. Now at this point, 33 minutes into the game, this 8,000 gold deficit is starting to mean less and less as time goes on. XP is starting to equalize. Neil's already up to level 18. This is the best team fight that PK's had the entire game if they want to move up and defend fire.
And it looks like they do, and this changes the complexion of the fight a lot, right? Now Kivo Fred is much more an active member in this battle in terms of being able to threaten one of the backlines of Radiance all on his own. I mean, we're talking about Scary and peeling off CycloneSpin and his damage, but now we can look a little bit more at what this dive potential for the Knights actually looks like.
The dive potential for the Knights is incredibly high. If Cubo's able to find a jump onto Cyclone, if Cubo's able to find a jump onto anyone, truly, the burst potential is there. Paul could very easily move into the backline and try and find a suicide ultimate, which would be worth it if he hits at least 3 targets. They have plenty of ways to close the gap as well. Scary D's speed boost and dash. Cubo's passive on Nike is already online. They have the mobility advantage.
Well, this is that dive you were looking for. The Fear No Evil should break that up a little bit as alongside the apple from BigManTingz, but they've left Aror way in the back, and he's in some trouble. But now Benji can try and sit on top of Paul. Paul does roar and find that kill, but he's got to keep on running from the big baby that's starting to stomp on him. CycloneSpin down the kill as well, taking care of Cubo Fred way in the back, but that's too much damage on to Benji as they look to lock him down. BigManTingz steps forward, sends Yemoja running, and maybe Radiance can turn this fight around after all. CycloneSpin comes back in with his ultimate, and the one left chopping block, that's Yemoja. Scary D and Zapman now all that stand between Radiance and a potential win, but they're going to ease up, head back towards the Fire Giant, and not get too ahead of themselves.
Benji's a little bit too low health to feel confident moving in for the end there, but with 3 members dead for 30 seconds, it could have been a close call. Instead, they go for the guaranteed plan, the enhanced Fire Giant. Already, we've seen that PK has a fantastic siege defense. They deflected an entire Fire Giant push from Radiance last time. They weren't contending with the enhanced. This time they are. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, but again, PK's already shown that they're comfortable doing it. I would have liked to see Radiance maybe at least move up, try and take a Phoenix, then back up to Fire Giant. But now, all of PK, 5 members strong, 15 seconds left on Yemoja on the respawn. It's going to be a completely neutral state again. It's going to be whether or not Radiance can find any sort of opening, how they decide to split up their push. If they decide to throw adapting into mid, there, no one really on the side of PK outside of maybe Paul can look for the 1v1 potential there. Scary D can certainly slow down, but no one's able really to stop the aggression that Adapting can bring on his own. And then the 4-man squad from Radiance, Benji, Aror, BigManTingz, and Cyclone, have fantastic siege potential in of themselves. BMT is going to have long-range poke. Aurora is going to be able to find the flop onto any target, immediately going to be followed up by the rest of the damage from his team. Cyclone, earlier I said he was a Gatling gun. That hasn't changed even in the slightest. It seems like they're going to go ahead and pick up the Oni Fury. Take a page out of Sanguine's book. The best way to open up the map is to put enhanced waves in every single lane.
Yeah, not a bad way to try and split up your opponent's focus, but with this Fire Giant and everybody but Aurora, Radiance still coming in with the enhanced version, the EFG, certainly with the advantage here in this next battle, even without those Oni waves. It looks like they are slowly trying to stack these waves up a bit to make sure that the Knights have to deal with these Onis once they start to show up. So they'll start over here in the left side lane with the already weakened duo lane Phoenix and let Benji keep the waves pushed up in mid. The Oni minion over in short lane should be able to do plenty of work to push itself up and be in position for this next fight.
But look where Benji is. They decided to send him as far away as humanly possible to split the push. Scary D's going to have to rotate over and slow him down. But with Enhanced Fire Giant, he can 1v1 a Phoenix every day of the week. Now 2 members have to rotate to slow him down. Cuvo decides better against it and rotates back towards the team fight. But that's something you have to contend with. Enhanced Fire Giant means that solo laners take out Phoenixes, especially Vamana. He's going to have that healing, the CC immunity. Scary D's not going to be able to stop him if Benji decides to just commit fully towards taking the Phoenix.
Well, the Oni waves have now met, but the good news is that man really has handled those clear duties. I was worried might be a bit too much for Paul earlier and cleared up the left side, cleared up the mid wave. It's just this right side that Benji's threatening. And without Scary D here, Radiance won a step forward. But look at all the damage CycloneSpin has taken way in the back of the fight. And meanwhile, Benji in danger of threatening or soloing Scary D here at this point. So that pulls Cubo, Fred, and Paul over. That means the rest of Radiance have got to step up in this vacuum now. But even still, looks like they can't. Zapman and Neil are keeping him at bay.
It's unfortunate timing. CycloneSpin was too low to feel like he can get aggressive, but Adapting has plenty of health.
And Zapman just uses the beads and pushes them back. Now CycloneSpin is too low. Cubo Fred gets aggressive, puts too much damage into the Aegis, but still gets the kill anyway. Meanwhile, Neil Ma, even low, happy to be a frontlining member. Paul found that long-range knock-up in Aurora. Falls. Zapman gets the credit. Benji wants to come back and clean up his work from earlier, but Scary D says no, pushes him back out, and the Knights have held on to their base. It's Radiance that are running back and licking their wounds. What went so wrong for Radiance in that fight?
CycloneSpin just takes a little bit too much damage. Benji doesn't quite get the memo, starts to aggress, forces 3 people to rotate from PK, but when your carries are though, when even one ability is going to be able to put Cyclone under, he can't move up. He can't leverage the fact that it is going to be a 4 versus 2 on the left side Phoenix. So instead, they back up, they try and heal up, maybe lifesteal on some back camps, and it buys just enough time for the rest of PK to rotate back, not have to worry about Benji anymore, as Scary D had already returned to base and healed back up. It's just truly unfortunate timing on the aggression from Radiance, and now PK pick up 2 clean kills, take a tier 2 tower in mid. If they did win another fight, PK that is, they can immediately leverage that into a Titan kill. No matter who wins the next big team fight, it's going to be the end of the match.
Someone can find a decisive win at this point. Kudos to Zapman for stepping up inside the Fear No Evil, essentially, and still find a way to deter CycloneSpin from finding any more aggression onto the left side Phoenix. So now at this point, the Knights can truly just feel as though they're toe-to-toe in any of these late-game battles. And Myth, this was their identity really all of Season 6. When they were SK, they were so willing to bunker down underneath their Phoenixes, to trust in that defense. And we're seeing some of those shades here now, even with a slightly different look with Cuvo Fred in for Sam for Soccer in the jungle role. They still play with patience. They still trust in their defense. They still know that the other side's not going to play perfect to round this game out, and there will be weaknesses to exploit.
And there certainly has been. That's 3 Fire Giant sieges that they deflected incredibly well. They maintain all 3 of their Phoenixes this time. Elixir Power now online for Zapman as well. He can move in very easily. If anyone gets hit by the axe, they're not just going to be licking their wounds. They're going to be waiting for that respawn timer in the grayscale screen. But Radiance, the first ones to get to the Fire Giant, drop it to about 70%, but reset it. Look at Cuvo on the back end. If anyone gets any lower, he's going to be able to blow them up on his own. Him just standing there is enough of a deterrent that Radiance have to reset Fire Giant. CycloneSpin has to back up and heal. Right now, PK, comfortable to just let Radiance be the first ones on the scene and aggress, knowing that if they pull aggro, PK should be in an even better position to find the dive into the backline. Scary D returns to base, top off his health. He got poked out a little bit there on the initial engagement, but he's going to be back and ready. No ultimates used just yet, and about every single active available for both teams. It's going to be a completely even fight.
And look at that mid wave. The Knights have been able to move up pretty close to that mid Phoenix. That's why Cuvo Fred's kind of lurking. He knows that he can always step forward and push that wave a bit more if he needs to. Now Cuvo in position to potentially find a backside flank and catch Radiance off guard, trying to disengage. The Knights are fully stepping forward. This is the pincer maneuver that they have been looking for. Neil Ma finds the stun. Meanwhile, Zapman wins the battle up against Aror freely and easily. Tings is in a whole lot of trouble, and Cuvo collects his life, making a double cyclone spin. Won't be able to get to the sky in time, and Zapman keeping Aror pushed entirely out of the fight. They switch targets over towards Benji. Zapman gets Aror. Benji will fall, and suddenly adapting full HP in a dream has to try and defend up against the entirety of the night. A collapse from Radiance is the patience from PK starting to pay off.
60 seconds left on the nearest respawn timer. CycloneSpin's up in 50. Adapting still has his ultimate available. It's going to take an insanely heroic play. I'm thinking 5-man Fear No Evil. But nope, Bees and Egg is still available for Paul. No one saw any aggression there. Adapting's going to have to back up. Never mind, he's going to go into the dirt. PK are going to be the winners of Game 3.
Yes, the Knights will indeed have closed this game out with a deicide. And Mifflin, it's so impressive what the Knights were able to do here in this game, because it really felt like Radiance had a stranglehold on this time and time again. For like the 25-minute mark and on, they were trying at least just hacking away at the Knights, but not able to quite break their way in. They got 3 Fire Giants. The Knights got 0 throughout that game, but it still was not enough for Radiance to be able to close that one out.
They just weren't quite able to find their way in. Off the back of that first Phoenix Siege they dropped, they weren't able to leverage that any further, and then from there, they didn't drop another Phoenix for the entirety of the game. That's due to the fact that PK are able to just maneuver around the map incredibly well. We saw them trading aggro, or I say aggro, you can't aggro a player. We saw them trading the defense against Cuvo and against Benji phenomenally. Anytime they split the push, they responded just perfectly enough to slow them down and then regroup as 5 for the concerted effort from Radiance's Siege. PK buckled down to defend for literally 20 minutes straight. That takes a lot of concentration and a lot of execution, but they do it incredibly well.
And they do indeed get their revenge for the way that this match went that first time when it ended up favoring Radiance. Good work there from the Knights. They find a 2-1 and improve, further cluttering up the standings. I'll get it back over to Dolston, though, so they can break it down a bit more on the desk.
Good work from the Knights, but great work from Finch and Mifflin to close out the day. It's an 11-game day of Smite here. 4 best-of-3s, 3 of them go the distance. More recently, though, Knights take it over Renegades. So the first bit of revenge here in rematch tour here, Aggro. What kind of pushed Knights forward here in this one? What gave them the advantage and ultimately the win?
Well, I guess Drake was right. Checks over stripes. Nike Jungle ends up making it work perfectly there for Cuvo. He's unkillable in the late game, and his dive is phenomenal. But defense winning championships continues to be a mantra for a reason. It's the same way that PK won Worlds last year. They were out of this game, man. I mean, they had no business being in this one at all. Constant dual lane pressure from adapting. Benji was creating so much space on this Vamana, but the decision to have Benji split right Phoenix while the rest of Radiance push left takes away from how much space Benji was creating the entire game in these team fights, and PK just responded to it really, really well. Cyclone dying on the first Phoenix Siege with both his relics up, it really stopped momentum for Radiance, and those are the moments in that early, it's mid-game, it's not quite late game yet, you've got a lead. If you give a team 4 minutes of minion waves to grab, waves are just worth so much in Smite right now, especially the way it's calculated in XP differential. Like, you just catch up so quickly, and that's really what happened. It felt like Radiance had this overwhelming lead. They botch one siege, and then PK is still behind, but they can play the game at that point, and that's really what happens there. It's a small margin, but you just can't afford to give them that much time. until you get to this late game composition where Cuvo just gets to do this to you. He dives freely, Paul's one-shotting your whole team. It just becomes too difficult.
I think this is actually the camera angle we ended up seeing for maybe the majority of the game down the stretch. It felt like the Knights were just kind of stuck in that perpetual defense. But you do a good job of explaining it there, and I like that you bring up Cuvo Fred, because it's that play right there on the replays that ultimately put the nail in the coffin here for Radiance. Smart play by Cuvo to keep that mid lane pushed in, also kind of working on the back side. Radiant, I don't know if you call it disjointed, but maybe a bit caught out, didn't expect Cuvo to be exactly where he was.
Yeah, and that's what something like the Nike jungle brings. I mean, you're not going to be dealing assassin-level damage, but you have so much more control over the team fights. You have that AoE, you have this massive slow and a huge health shield. Discordia ult goes from doing 2/3 of your HP to barely tickling you because 2/3 of your HP are covered by that shield from the Sentinel of Zeus ultimate. I don't know, man. Maybe Nike Jungle is the real deal. Gilly and Sino and all the boys that have been playing it in ranked, and maybe they were onto something all along.
Hey, it works out here for the Knights. Neil, a big role player in this one, helped the Knights grab a win over a team in Radiance that 2-0'd them earlier on this year, and wouldn't you guess it, we got him standing by for an interview.
Thanks, Dolson. Neil Ma, a critical piece of this Knights team that seems to be improving every time we see them. And Neil, I want to ask you, first things off, what does it feel for you all to be able to beat Radiance, especially because of the way that you all dropped to them that first time with the base race and one throne sort of team fight? You all must have felt that whole time like if you just got a chance, you really could have taken down this squad.
Yeah, it feels good, obviously. Like, getting revenge on a team the second time around is always really nice, and I just like that today we were able to draw the games out and kind of play our own game. We were behind a lot, but it was kind of reminiscent to our old play back in like Season 5 and in Season 6. So just showing that even if we get behind, we can still hang in there, even though we're known as a team that's pretty aggressive early and often, is pretty good as well. And yeah, obviously beating a team as good as Radiance always feels great.
Yeah, I've always said that is what your greatest strength is. You all have the potential to put games away in the first 18 minutes or win them in 48 either. You can kind of handle both ends of the spectrum. What do you attribute to? Is that Zatman a lot that's preaching the patience? Is that you? Is it a team mentality? Where does that come from?
I think it just depends on draft a lot, right? I think it just depends what we picked, and we have certain gods we know we can do well in our team fight on well on. We know even if it goes 50 minutes, if we scuff the early game, we're still in it. I think it's just part of our team culture too. Like, we know we're never out of a game. Like, it doesn't matter if they have a really good late game team comp and you have a really bad late game team comp. As long as you're in the game and you put yourselves in a position to make plays, you always have a shot in a game. So I think it's just about everyone on the team knowing that you're never out of a game no matter what. And all it takes is the enemy team making one mistake or you making one play and you can win the game.
Well, the last thing that I will ask you about here, Neil, is what about Paul's play and getting all those bands focused directly on him and then still being able to pop off the way that he did? Is that just the way that you guys play around him or some of that individual value that he brings?
Just another day in the office for Paul, He's always like, oh, they banned this and this and this. I still got this, though. Like, what are they thinking? Paul's a really special player and a good guy to play with, and it's really tough to ban him out. I think that we do a good job of helping him out, but I think a lot of the credit obviously should go to him. His God pool is really big and diverse and wonky, and just feels like when he's comfortable on a God pick, like it doesn't even matter the matchups too much. Like, he'll find a way. So props to him. He's a beast of a player.
A great asset to have on an already strong team. The Knights looking better every time we see them. Thanks, Neil, for taking some time to talk with me. I'll get it back over to Dolson to wrap up this day for us.
Thanks, Finch.
Paul, absolutely a beast of a player that had a beast of a day here for the Knights. And with that win, Aggro, the Knights now move themselves right back to even, but we've seen close-knit standings-wise through and through here, top to bottom. So Sanguine, or Knights rather, jump themselves up to fourth, tied with a couple other teams there now. 2 games out of the lead still with Rival, but only 1 game out of second place where Radiance and Sanguine are holding their spot.
Man, it's just crazy, dude. This year has been so amazing to watch how competitive it's been, and this standings sheet is going to get messier and messier as the phase goes on, no doubt.
Well, Obey tomorrow, fresh jungler on the map for them. We'll look to make the standings slightly more messy. And Aggro, it's been announced. Here it is. Obey are bringing Sino in to be their jungler. His return to the SPL tomorrow kicks off against Sanguine. What are your thoughts on the Obey change?
I think this was the best possible pickup for Obey. I know that a lot of people in the SMITE community might have a bit of a sour taste in their mouth coming off of Sino's last year and joining Space Station and having a rough close there. But this dude is a World's MVP. He's a leader, which I think Obey desperately needed. He's a veteran, and he's an incredibly talented player. He's also going to play weird things. I'm looking, fingers crossed for the jungle, the Chalk jungle, a personal favorite of mine, the Hades jungle. But those sorts of things aside, I think that he's exactly what the doctor ordered for Obey. And we should just pencil in the Obey victory now, right? I mean, if you won week 1, you've lost this week, and that means that Sanguine's due to lose. So just pack it up. I'm not even sure we need to broadcast it.
And that game will kick off our day tomorrow. 3 p.m. Eastern Time is when the SPL will kick off. We still got some SCC tournament matches going. We went through EU today. NA semis tomorrow, see who makes it into the finals, which will be broadcasting before the SPL on Sunday. That's 11 a.m. Eastern Time when all of that kicks off, so make sure to tune in. It was a long one here in the SPL and the SCC. 4 best-of-3 sets, 3 of which go the full distance. Lots of fun, though. Upsets all around. Sanguine Obey kick off the SPL tomorrow. You don't want to miss it.
Page it.